What if a 4-year-old could solve the problem that even a genius couldn't? It was a question that echoed in the minds of everyone in the room, lingering like an unsolved riddle. But at the moment, it wasn't just a theoretical question, it was happening, right before their eyes. Elon Musk, the genius entrepreneur behind Tesla and SpaceX, sat in a room filled with some of the brightest minds in the world. Yet, despite all the intellect and innovation in the room, there was a problem that no one could crack. The task seemed simple enough at first, an engineering conundrum that could push the boundaries of Musk's ambitious projects. But as the hours ticked by, frustration began to mount. Tesla's self-driving cars, the next generation of SpaceX rockets, a battery technology breakthrough, every innovation Musk was chasing depended on solving this one, seemingly simple problem. But each attempt made by his team had been met with failure. Musk, though usually known for his calm demeanor, looked visibly agitated. His eyes darted over the pile of complex equations, algorithms, and engineering models spread out on the table. The team of experts around him, engineers, physicists, and tech specialists, sat in silence, each of them stuck at the same dead end. "I don't get it," Musk muttered, running his fingers through his hair. "We've looked at this from every angle. There's got to be a solution, but why can't we find it?" The room was thick with tension, each person trying to break through the mental barrier that had them all stumped. It wasn't often that Elon Musk's projects faced such a major setback, and the weight of this one was beginning to feel overwhelming. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door, breaking the silence. Musk, looking up from his work, blinked as a small child walked into the room, holding the hand of a woman. The child, no more than 4 years old, had a curious glint in his eye, his face full of innocent wonder. The group stared, puzzled. The woman, a friend of one of the engineers, smiled nervously. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, "but Gavin here wanted to see where all the grown-ups worked." Musk, more annoyed than anything, barely glanced at the child. "Well, we're in the middle of something pretty serious here. This is a little beyond a kid's interest." But the child didn't seem deterred. Gavin, the little boy, glanced at the table full of diagrams and equations, his small hands clutching a toy rocket ship. He looked up at Musk with wide eyes and asked, "What's that?" Musk couldn't help but smile slightly at the innocence of the question. "That's a problem," he replied dryly, "a very difficult one." But to his surprise, Gavin didn't turn away, distracted by something else as children typically do. Instead, the boy stepped closer to the table, peering at the equations and diagrams with an almost unnatural focus. Musk's curiosity piqued. He had seen many bright children in his life, but something about Gavin was different. The child's eyes scanned the pages quickly, as if he was processing every detail. Then, without missing a beat, Gavin said, "I think I know how to fix it." There was a moment of stunned silence in the room. Everyone froze, including Musk, who was now staring at the boy as if he had just spoken an alien language. The engineers exchanged glances, some stifling chuckles, others clearly trying to suppress a more sarcastic response. "What?" one of them asked, a slight smirk on his face. "A 4-year-old is going to fix this?" Musk, who had always prided himself on his ability to see potential where others might not, felt a slight tug of curiosity. He gestured toward the board. "Go ahead, kid. Show us." For a few moments, Gavin stood silently, his little fingers running across the equations, as if reading them aloud in his head. The room was unnervingly quiet, the only sound being the soft hum of the air conditioning. Musk found himself watching the boy with more intensity than he expected. Gavin then pointed to a specific part of the diagram, the one that had given them all so much trouble. "You need to reverse the polarity here," Gavin said, his voice soft but certain. "Then, adjust the input angle by 43 degrees, and add a feedback loop to stabilize the energy transfer. The calculations you have are off by a fraction." Musk blinked. The words themselves didn't make much sense, but there was something in the way Gavin spoke. There was no hesitation, no uncertainty. It was as if the child had understood something that none of the adults in the room had even considered. One of the engineers scoffed. "You're telling us a 4-year-old has figured out a way to fix this," he said, trying to mask his disbelief with a chuckle. "Kid, this is rocket science. Go back to your toy blocks." But Musk wasn't laughing. He stood up from his seat, his eyes fixed on Gavin. There was something in the boy's explanation that didn't feel like a fluke. Musk wasn't someone easily impressed, but this was different. The complexity of the problem was something no one in the room had been able to crack, not even Musk himself. "Do you know what you're saying?" Musk asked, his voice steady. Gavin, seemingly oblivious to the skepticism in the room, nodded confidently. "Yeah. You need to fix the energy flow. Then the rocket will work." Musk turned toward the engineers. His face was serious, his usual playful demeanor replaced by the focus that only came when he was fully immersed in a challenge. "What if we try it?" he said, his voice low. A few of the engineers exchanged uneasy glances. It was a huge risk. But Musk had always been a believer in taking chances. They'd reached an impasse. What did they have to lose? "All right," Musk said, "let's try it. Run the calculations based on what Gavin suggested." The engineers hesitated, but eventually, they started to type into their laptops, inputting the new parameters Gavin had suggested. As they worked, Musk observed the boy, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Could a 4-year-old really have just solved the problem? As the engineers ran the new simulations, the room grew tense again. They watched the numbers, equations, and graphs flicker across their screens. Then, slowly, one of the engineers gasped. "It's working, it's really working." Musk's heart skipped a beat. The simulations were aligning. The solution that Gavin had suggested was actually working. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the magnitude of what had just happened. The child, barely old enough to understand the concept of the problem, had just done what some of the brightest minds in the world couldn't. Gavin, completely unaware of the impact of his words, turned to Musk with a smile. "Told you it would work." Musk's lips curled into a grin, though it wasn't entirely one of amusement. It was something deeper, a mixture of shock, awe, and the feeling that he'd just witnessed something extraordinary. The rest of the team stood there, stunned, as Musk walked up to Gavin. He crouched down to the boy's level, his expression a mix of disbelief and admiration. "You've just changed everything," Musk said quietly, his voice filled with a new sense of respect. And in that moment, Musk realized that this encounter was more than just a fluke. It was the beginning of something that would defy all expectations, a journey that would challenge everything Musk had ever known. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Gavin was not your typical 4-year-old. While most children his age were learning how to spell their names or struggling to tie their shoes, Gavin was doing things that made the world's most brilliant engineers stop and take notice. He could read complex diagrams, solve puzzles that stumped adults, and, apparently, revolutionize the very foundations of cutting-edge technology. But as extraordinary as it all seemed, Gavin was, in many ways, just a regular kid. He had a mother, Sarah, who was a schoolteacher, and a father, Greg, who worked as a software engineer. Despite their own professional successes, neither Sarah nor Greg had ever imagined that their son would become the center of such a remarkable event. Gavin's extraordinary mind wasn't something they were fully prepared for, but it was something they had begun to notice early on. From the time Gavin could walk, he had been curious. His first word wasn't "mama" or "dada," but "how." And from that moment on, it seemed that "how" became his favorite word. He would ask it endlessly: how does this work? Why does that happen? How can we fix this? At first, it seemed like typical toddler curiosity. But as Gavin grew, his questions became more specific, his insights sharper. By the age of 3, he was already assembling intricate Lego structures without guidance. Not just castles or cars, but things like miniature engines, complex bridges, and even functioning machines. At least, they appeared to be functioning from the perspective of a small child. When his parents saw him build something that mimicked the mechanics of a real-world device, they assumed it was just random play. But what they didn't realize was that Gavin wasn't just mimicking, he was understanding. Sarah often joked that Gavin was born with a kind of built-in genius. It was a joke, but deep down, she had a creeping suspicion that there was truth to it. Gavin had an unusual way of focusing on things for a 4-year-old. He didn't just play games or watch cartoons. He asked questions about everything. His fascination with machines and how things work became an obsession, something that took up every waking moment. One evening, when Gavin was still free, Greg found his son in the garage, surrounded by open boxes of old electronic gadgets, scraps from devices that had long since been discarded. Gavin was sitting cross-legged on the floor, concentrating hard on something in his tiny hands. Greg bent down, curious. "What are you doing, buddy?" Greg asked, though he already had an inkling. Gavin didn't look up. Instead, he held up a piece of a broken circuit board and examined it closely, his tiny fingers tracing the lines with the precision of someone much older. "Fixing it," Gavin replied, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "I think I can make it work." Greg chuckled, not fully understanding. "Okay, sure," he said, indulging his son. "But what does it do?" "I'm making a new radio," Gavin said, completely serious. "It's going to play music." It wasn't just the words that struck Greg, it was the manner in which Gavin said them. The confidence. The absolute certainty that a broken circuit board could be transformed into something entirely new. Later that night, Greg went to bed thinking it was just a phase. Every kid goes through an obsession with something. But when he woke up the next morning, he found Gavin sitting at the breakfast table, proudly displaying a makeshift radio that, against all odds, actually worked. The toy had transformed, with a speaker and wires attached to it, playing a static-filled version of a song Greg recognized. It wasn't perfect, but it was functioning. That was when Greg realized that Gavin's mind wasn't like most children's. It was different. It was extraordinary. By the time Gavin was 4, his abilities had only expanded. He had already begun to grasp basic concepts of engineering, physics, and mathematics. But these weren't things that his parents had explicitly taught him. They were things that Gavin simply understood, instinctively. He began to understand how things worked just by observing them. And when Musk's team of engineers had been struggling with the problem that would eventually bring Gavin into their lives, he was probably the least likely person anyone would expect to solve it. But, somehow, that made perfect sense in hindsight. For Gavin, understanding the problem and coming up with a solution was simply a matter of how things fit together. It wasn't about complexity, it was about patterns. As the days passed following the incident at SpaceX, Greg and Sarah found themselves caught in a whirlwind they couldn't have anticipated. Neither of them had ever expected Gavin's potential to extend so far beyond what they had considered possible. Their child wasn't just a genius, he was on the brink of something bigger than anyone could imagine. After the meeting, Sarah had called Greg to let him know what had happened. "You won't believe it," she had said, her voice trembling with disbelief. "Gavin, he solved the problem. The one that Musk and his team couldn't figure out. He just figured it out." Greg had been stunned. "What do you mean, he figured it out?" "I mean exactly that," Sarah had replied. "They gave him the problem. And he solved it." Greg had been speechless for a few seconds. Then, in a quiet voice, he asked, "Is this the start of something huge?" Sarah's answer had been uncertain, as if she wasn't sure herself. "I don't know. But maybe, just maybe." It wasn't long before Gavin was pulled into the world of adults, though he didn't seem to notice the difference. As strange as it was for his parents, to Gavin, the idea of solving problems, building things, and creating solutions was as natural as playing with toys. He had never thought of himself as anything special. But now, the world was beginning to notice. Meanwhile, Musk was reflecting on the oddness of the encounter. He had always known that great minds often come from unexpected places, but Gavin was different. This wasn't just brilliance, it was something else entirely. It was a raw, untapped potential that had somehow emerged from a child, without any formal training, without any complex background. And as Musk sat in his office late that night, thinking about the unexpected turn of events, he began to wonder, what if this wasn't just a coincidence? What if this 4-year-old boy, Gavin, was the key to something bigger than anyone had ever dreamed of? The following weeks were a whirlwind for everyone involved in the project. The SpaceX engineers, who had initially brushed off Gavin's contribution as a fluke, couldn't deny the results any longer. The adjustments Gavin had suggested, though simple on paper, had unlocked a breakthrough no one had expected. The team went over the calculations and adjustments again and again, only to find that Gavin's insight had indeed solved the problem. But Musk wasn't someone to settle for easy answers. If a 4-year-old could solve a problem this complex, what else was Gavin capable of? Musk's curiosity was piqued, and he was determined to find out just how deep Gavin's understanding went. It was early one morning when Musk reached out to Sarah, asking if she and Gavin could visit the SpaceX headquarters again. They had a new project in mind, a much larger and more ambitious one, and this time, they needed Gavin's mind. Sarah, though understandably hesitant at first, agreed. She had always known her son was special, but the magnitude of what had happened still hadn't fully sunk in. The idea of Gavin being a part of a major technological breakthrough was still hard to grasp, but she knew she couldn't deny his abilities any longer. When they arrived at SpaceX, the atmosphere was tense with anticipation. The engineers were hard at work, and the buzz of activity in the air felt like the calm before a storm. Musk greeted them personally, his usual confident smile replaced by an expression of deep focus. "Thanks for coming in," he said, shaking Sarah's hand. "And thank you for bringing Gavin. We've got a new challenge for him, one that we think is right up his alley." Gavin, who had been quiet the entire way to SpaceX, looked up at Musk with wide eyes. He was a little nervous, but that didn't stop his natural curiosity from taking over. "What are we going to fix this time?" he asked, his voice filled with quiet excitement. Musk chuckled. "We're not fixing anything right now. We're going to build something brand new." Sarah raised an eyebrow, not entirely sure what that meant. "Build something?" she asked. "What kind of thing?" "This is an ambitious project," Musk explained. "It's something we've been working on for a while, a new rocket propulsion system. We need to optimize energy transfer and make it more efficient. If we can get this right, it could change everything." Gavin tilted his head slightly, absorbing the information as though it were just another puzzle to solve. Without saying much more, he turned and walked toward a table cluttered with various models, blueprints, and mock-ups of rockets and engines. The engineers watched curiously as Gavin picked up a pen and began sketching. For a moment, no one spoke. Sarah stood off to the side, watching as her son worked. She could hardly believe what she was seeing. Gavin was so focused, so completely absorbed in the task at hand. It was as if the entire room had faded into the background, and the only thing that mattered to Gavin was figuring out how to make the complex problem in front of him work. Musk, too, watched in silence. He wasn't sure what he was expecting, but what he saw was a child working with the ease and concentration of someone much older, someone far beyond his years. As Gavin continued to sketch, the engineers gathered around, their eyes widening with disbelief. The solutions Gavin was proposing, though unconventional, seemed to make sense. They were simple, direct, and precise. Each line Gavin drew represented a step forward in solving a problem that had stumped some of the brightest minds for months. "What is he doing?" one of the engineers whispered to another. "I mean, he's not just doodling. He's working through the actual equations." Musk, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. "What he's doing is thinking differently. The thing about genius is that it doesn't always follow the rules. Sometimes, it's about seeing what everyone else misses. At first, it felt like a novelty, a fun experiment to let the kid draw some lines and see where it went. But as the hours passed, something extraordinary happened. The design Gavin was sketching began to make more and more sense. The propulsion system, which had been a complex web of problems and impossible constraints, was slowly starting to take shape in a way that no one had considered before. By the time lunch rolled around, Musk was sitting across from Gavin, his mind racing. He had always prided himself on his ability to innovate, to see patterns that others couldn't, but this was something else. Gavin was solving problems in ways that defied logic. It was as if the child had an innate understanding of how things worked, how they were supposed to work, at the most fundamental level. "What's your secret, Gavin?" Musk asked, his voice filled with genuine curiosity. Gavin, who had been happily eating his lunch and discussing his favorite cartoons, looked up at Musk with a thoughtful expression. "I don't know. I just think about how things go together. Like when I build things with my Legos. You can't force them to fit, you have to let them fit. It's the same with this rocket." Musk smiled, amused by Gavin's simplicity. "So it's all about fitting things together?" Gavin nodded earnestly. "Yeah, but you have to be careful. Some pieces don't belong, and if you put them in the wrong place, it won't work." It was that simple logic, something Musk had overlooked for years, that suddenly clicked in his mind. Perhaps it wasn't about having all the answers right away. Maybe the secret to real innovation was about seeing how pieces fit together, even when it didn't seem to make sense at first. Gavin's understanding was instinctive, almost primal, in a way that Musk could barely comprehend. After lunch, they continued to work together. The team of engineers, once skeptical, had now fully embraced Gavin's contributions. They quickly ran simulations based on the designs the young boy had suggested, and to everyone's astonishment, the results were positive. The new propulsion system was more efficient, more stable, and cheaper to produce. The numbers were working in ways they hadn't anticipated. By the end of the day, Gavin had not only contributed a novel approach to the propulsion system but had also provided insights into several other aspects of the rocket's design. Musk stood at the doorway of the meeting room, watching the team work. They were exhausted, but their eyes were filled with renewed hope and energy. They had found the breakthrough they had been searching for, and they hadn't found it in a textbook or research paper. They had found it in the mind of a child. As the engineers filed out of the room, Musk remained, his gaze still fixed on Gavin. The boy was playing with a model rocket, humming to himself. There was no fanfare, no dramatic reveal. It was as if, in Gavin's mind, this was just another day at the office. But for Musk, it was a revelation. Gavin had done more than just solve a problem. He had shown him a new way of thinking, a way that could change the future. It wasn't about being the smartest or the most experienced, it was about seeing the world with fresh eyes, about allowing ideas to flow freely, without the weight of preconceived notions. Musk realized that Gavin wasn't just a collaborator. He was the future. The following weeks were a blur for Gavin and his family. After his remarkable breakthrough with SpaceX, life at home had become a mix of disbelief and wonder. Greg and Sarah could hardly wrap their heads around what had happened. Their son, their little boy, was now at the center of a technological revolution, collaborating with the world's leading innovators and scientists. He was living in a world they had only ever seen on television, surrounded by rockets, engineers, and billionaires, all fascinated by his ability to solve problems they couldn't even begin to understand. The call from SpaceX had come in late one evening, just as Sarah was tucking Gavin into bed. It was Musk, asking if Gavin could return to the headquarters the next day. There was a new challenge they needed his insight on, a new technology that was beyond anything they had attempted before. Greg and Sarah, both in disbelief, could only stare at each other after the call ended. They had been prepared for the idea of Gavin's talent being recognized, but not like this. Greg sat on the edge of Gavin's bed, watching his son drift off to sleep. The small, peaceful face of the boy who was changing the world made everything feel surreal. Gavin's brilliance wasn't just about the things he could do, it was how he did them, with no effort, no stress, just a natural, effortless flow of creativity. It was as if the entire universe of knowledge was laid out in front of him, waiting to be unlocked, and Gavin was the one to do it. What do we do now? Greg whispered to himself. Sarah stood in the doorway, her arms crossed. I don't know, she said softly. But I think we have to let him follow his path, wherever it leads. That night, as Sarah lay in bed, she thought about the whirlwind they had entered. This wasn't just about their son's success anymore, this was about something much bigger. She had always wanted the best for Gavin, but now, she wondered if they were on the verge of something that could change the course of human history. The next morning, Gavin woke up bright and early, as usual. He wasn't nervous or overwhelmed by the thought of going back to SpaceX. To him, it was just another place to explore, another challenge to tackle. After all, he had solved the rocket problem, hadn't he? What was the next puzzle? As they drove to SpaceX, Sarah couldn't help but notice how calm and content Gavin seemed. He was playing with a small toy rocket in the back seat, completely absorbed in his thoughts. It was strange to think that the same child who loved cartoons and drawing was now part of some of the most advanced projects in the world. Arriving at SpaceX, they were greeted by Musk and a small team of engineers. This time, there was a sense of urgency in the air, an air of anticipation. We've been working on something new, Musk said, leading them into a large conference room. It's a technology that could completely change the way we travel to space. But there's a catch. It's complicated. We need Gavin's help to make it work. Gavin's eyes lit up as they showed him the holographic model of the new spacecraft. Unlike any rocket they had designed before, this one was designed to be reusable on a level that had never been attempted. It wasn't just about launching rockets, this was a new kind of propulsion system that would require precision, efficiency, and an entirely new way of thinking. As the engineers explained the mechanics of the craft, Gavin listened intently, nodding as if he understood every word. It was clear to everyone in the room that this wasn't just a child playing along, Gavin was engaged, his mind already racing through the possibilities, seeing patterns that no one else could. After a few minutes of silence, Gavin spoke up. You need to make the engines work like a heart, he said, his voice clear and calm. The way a heart pumps blood to different parts of the body, your engines need to pump energy to the right places at the right time. You can't just use it all at once, you have to control the flow. The room was silent for a moment, the engineers exchanging confused looks. But then, one of them, a senior propulsion expert named Rachel, began to speak. That's, actually a really good analogy. You're saying we should regulate the energy flow like the circulatory system in the human body? Gavin nodded. Exactly. If you pump too much, it won't work. If you don't pump enough, it won't get anywhere. Musk looked at Gavin with a mix of astonishment and admiration. It was as if Gavin had cut straight to the heart of the problem, bypassing all the unnecessary complexity. And it wasn't just about the analogy, Gavin was offering a solution, one that none of them had considered. For the rest of the day, Gavin worked alongside the engineers, helping them understand how to tweak the propulsion system. They went through several prototypes, adjusting the fuel efficiency, the energy transfer mechanisms, and the way the engines communicated with one another. Gavin, with his innate understanding of systems and patterns, led them through each change, his quiet but confident demeanor never wavering. It was like he had an intuitive sense of how to make everything fit. By the end of the day, they had a working prototype. The new system wasn't just theoretical anymore, it was real. It was functioning. Gavin sat back in his chair, looking at the engineers with a satisfied smile. It works now, he said simply. Just like you said it would. Musk stood up, his face serious. You've done something incredible here, Gavin, he said. This isn't just about solving a problem. This is about changing how we approach space travel. You've made history today. Gavin grinned, though his expression was still as calm as ever. "I didn't make history. I just helped fix the problem." Musk chuckled softly. "Well, I think you've done more than just fix a problem. You've opened up a whole new world of possibilities." As Gavin and his family left SpaceX that evening, Sarah couldn't help but feel a surge of pride and awe. Her son had just changed the course of human history in a way that no one could have anticipated. The world would be forever different because of the way Gavin saw the world. It wasn't about knowledge, or experience, or even intelligence. It was about the ability to see things differently, to look at problems not as barriers, but as opportunities to build something new. And as she looked back at Gavin, walking beside her with that characteristic smile on his face, Sarah realized that this was just the beginning. Gavin was going to change the world. In ways that no one could have predicted. But she also knew that with his genius came something even more important, the humility to never stop learning, to never stop asking questions, and to never stop believing that everything, even the impossible, could be figured out. The media storm surrounding Gavin's involvement with SpaceX had barely begun to subside when a new wave of attention hit. News outlets worldwide scrambled to interview Gavin, calling him the 4-year-old genius who had revolutionized rocket technology. Talk shows, documentaries, and even scientific publications began speculating on the origins of his extraordinary mind. Could he be the next Einstein? Was he a child prodigy, or was there something even deeper at play? But for Gavin, the whirlwind of fame didn't change much. He still loved his Legos, still spent hours playing with his toy rockets, and still had his favorite cartoons to look forward to. Fame, in his eyes, was just another thing to play with, like the pieces of a puzzle waiting to be assembled. Yet, for Sarah and Greg, it was harder to adjust. They had seen Gavin's brilliance up close, but now, they were seeing the world's reaction to it, a world that seemed both fascinated and overwhelmed by what their son had accomplished. As much as they were proud of Gavin, they were also worried about the attention he was receiving. Was it too much for him? Could he handle the pressure? One evening, after a particularly hectic day of interviews and press conferences, Sarah sat down with Gavin in their living room. He was building a model rocket, his usual focus evident in the way he maneuvered the pieces with steady hands. "Gavin," Sarah began softly, her voice filled with concern. "Do you ever feel overwhelmed by all the people talking about you? All the attention?" Gavin looked up from his project, his face thoughtful. "Not really. It's kind of fun, like when people watch me build things. I like showing them how it works." He paused, a small smile creeping onto his lips. "But sometimes, it's like, they want me to do it all the time. I can't always build rockets, Mom. Sometimes I just want to play." Sarah's heart swelled with a mix of pride and worry. Gavin's ability to be so grounded, so unbothered by the chaos around him, was both a blessing and a challenge. He had the mind of someone decades older, yet he had the innocence and joy of a child. It was a delicate balance, and she wasn't sure how long it could last. "I know, sweetie," she said, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "And you should always get to play. You're just a kid, after all. You don't have to fix the world every day." Gavin smiled, his eyes lighting up as he went back to his rocket. "I like fixing things. But I think I need more pieces to do it." That was when Sarah realized something crucial. Gavin didn't just want to solve problems for the sake of solving them, he wanted to understand them fully, to have all the pieces of the puzzle before he could build something new. It wasn't just about fixing what was broken, it was about creating something even better from what already existed. As the days passed, more requests for Gavin's involvement came in. Musk, of course, was always the most persistent. SpaceX had another ambitious project on the horizon, a new spacecraft designed for long-term space exploration. They needed Gavin's insights, his natural ability to connect dots in ways that were previously unimaginable. Musk had been adamant, Gavin's help was indispensable. But as much as Greg and Sarah trusted Musk and SpaceX, they knew they had to be careful. they couldn't allow Gavin to become a tool for others' ambitions. Gavin was still their son, he was still just a little boy, and they wanted him to have a childhood, to play, to dream, without the weight of the world constantly on his shoulders. They had a family meeting, one night after dinner, to discuss how best to approach everything. The conversation was a delicate one. Greg was pragmatic, worried about the long-term effects of the media frenzy on Gavin's well-being. He feared that if they didn't set clear boundaries now, Gavin would lose his sense of self in the process. "I know we can't shut him off from the world," Greg said, "but we have to protect him. We have to make sure he doesn't get swallowed up by all this. His mind is a gift, but it's still his to develop. He needs to decide what he wants to do, not just follow other people's expectations." Sarah nodded in agreement. "We've always let him choose his path. We've always encouraged him to explore, to follow his curiosity. But now, it feels like the whole world is watching. And I'm scared it might change him. We need to be the ones guiding him," Greg added. "We'll let him have the space to grow, but we can't let others dictate what that growth looks like. We have to protect his innocence." It was a hard conversation to have, but an important one. They didn't want to stifle Gavin's genius, but they didn't want to exploit it either. They knew there would be challenges ahead, but they also knew they couldn't let the world define Gavin's life. He was still their son, the same little boy who loved playing with rockets, who marveled at the stars, and who believed that everything could be solved if you just had the right pieces. As the days turned into weeks, the family's resolve began to harden. They set boundaries, keeping Gavin's schedule manageable and ensuring he had enough time for himself. They limited the number of interviews he participated in and made sure that, no matter how busy their lives became, they always had time for family, time to play, time to relax, time to simply be. Meanwhile, at SpaceX, the engineers continued to work on the new spacecraft. With Gavin's contributions, the design had advanced significantly. The propulsion system that had once been a theoretical dream was now a tangible reality, thanks to the insights a child had provided. But it wasn't just the technical breakthroughs that made Gavin special, it was the way he approached every challenge. For Musk, Gavin was a once-in-a-lifetime phenomenon. He knew that if they continued working together, they could achieve things that no one had ever imagined before. But even Musk understood that the boy needed to grow at his own pace, to be given the time and space to develop his ideas without the pressures of the world bearing down on him. And so, for a while, things settled into a new rhythm. The projects at SpaceX advanced steadily, with Gavin's occasional input proving invaluable. But beyond the technical achievements, the world was beginning to see something even more profound, a child who could solve problems with an ease that defied explanation, but who still had the joy and wonder of a kid learning about the world. It was this balance, the genius and the innocence, that made Gavin's journey so remarkable. He wasn't just changing the world with his brilliance. He was doing it while holding on to the very thing that made him human, his curiosity, his wonder, and his ability to dream. The ripple effect of Gavin's involvement in SpaceX, and later in other fields, was just beginning. But one thing was clear, Gavin was more than just a child prodigy. He was a glimpse into the future, a future where imagination and intellect could coexist in harmony, where the boundaries of possibility were limited only by the questions we dared to ask. And as Gavin continued to grow, his journey would leave a lasting mark on the world. But for now, he was still just a child, playing, dreaming, and solving problems in ways no one could have ever anticipated. Months passed, and the ripple effect of Gavin's involvement with SpaceX began to expand far beyond the walls of the company. His groundbreaking contributions had garnered attention not only from the tech world but from every corner of the globe. Innovators in industries ranging from healthcare to artificial intelligence began to reach out, hoping for his insight. It wasn't just that Gavin had solved problems in ways no one had thought of before, it was that he was fundamentally shifting the way people viewed innovation. Gavin, however, remained unaffected by the growing storm around him. The young genius, who had once been a regular boy playing with toys in his bedroom, was now at the forefront of cutting-edge advancements that would define the future. But he didn't seem to care about any of it. All he wanted was to keep building, exploring, and learning. He loved being involved with SpaceX, sure, but it was still just another puzzle for him to figure out. Greg and Sarah, on the other hand, were struggling with the increasing demands placed on their son. Though they had initially been proud of Gavin's success, they had started to worry about the pressure he was under. It was one thing to help with a few rocket projects, but now the world was watching him. It seemed that every time they blinked, another company, another institution, another research facility was calling, hoping for Gavin's genius to solve their problems. "Gavin doesn't even get a break anymore," Sarah said one night, exhaustion evident in her voice. "He's constantly being asked to help with something, and it's getting harder to say no." Greg ran a hand through his hair, his brow furrowed in frustration. "I know, but what are we supposed to do? He's solving things that people decades older than him couldn't even begin to understand. We can't just ignore that." "I'm not saying we should ignore it," Sarah replied, "but we need to protect him. We have to remember he's just a little boy. What happens if he starts feeling like he's never allowed to just be a kid?" Greg sighed deeply, his worry about Gavin's well-being slowly creeping into every corner of his mind. The problem wasn't that Gavin wasn't excelling, it was that Gavin was excelling too much, too soon. Every time Gavin solved a problem, he was thrust further into the spotlight, and the pressure only mounted. One night, after dinner, Sarah had a quiet conversation with Gavin. She wanted to make sure he was still happy, still enjoying the work he was doing, and that it wasn't becoming a burden. "Gavin," she began, sitting down beside him as he finished up a puzzle on the table. "How do you feel about all the work you're doing at SpaceX and with all the other people?" Gavin didn't immediately respond. Instead, he tilted his head as if considering the question. After a long pause, he looked up at Sarah, his face unusually serious for a 4-year-old. "I like it," he said softly. "I like solving things. It feels good, like when I figure out how the pieces fit together in my puzzles. But sometimes, it feels like I have to fix everything. I can't fix everything, though. There's too much." Sarah's heart sank. He was only 4, and already, he was shouldering a burden that many adults couldn't even bear. It wasn't the same as when he was just solving puzzles in his room for fun. Now, the stakes were much higher. "You don't have to fix everything, Gavin," Sarah said gently, her voice tender. "You're allowed to take a break. You're allowed to be a kid." Gavin looked down at the puzzle in front of him, his small hands fiddling with the pieces. "But people need help, Mom. I want to help them. If I stop helping, they won't get better." "That's true," Sarah agreed, "but helping doesn't mean you have to give up everything. You can help and still take care of yourself. You're important, too, you know. You're allowed to take breaks. You're allowed to play. It's okay to be a little boy who likes toys and rockets." Gavin's eyes softened as he looked up at his mother. "Okay. I'll play more. But I still want to help. I'll figure it out." Sarah kissed the top of his head, relieved that he was still able to express his feelings, even if he couldn't fully understand the weight of his own genius just yet. As long as he felt free to express himself and still had the joy of a child, she would hold on to that as long as she could. Over the next few days, they adjusted Gavin's schedule. SpaceX, understanding Gavin's need for rest, began to prioritize his involvement only in critical projects, giving him more time for school, play, and simply being with his family. It wasn't easy, there were still companies lining up to meet with him, but Gavin's family remained steadfast in their desire to protect his innocence. Meanwhile, across the globe, the impact of Gavin's work was beginning to be felt in unexpected ways. One of the most exciting developments was in the medical field. A team of doctors from a cutting-edge research institute had seen the way Gavin approached complex problems with simplicity, and they reached out, hoping he could help with a challenge that had plagued them for years, designing a medical device that could treat heart conditions without the need for invasive surgery. At first, the doctors were hesitant to approach such a young child. But after reviewing Gavin's contributions to SpaceX, they realized that his mind worked in ways that others simply couldn't replicate. Gavin's method of simplifying complex systems made him the perfect candidate to offer an outside-the-box perspective on a problem that had stumped some of the most brilliant minds in cardiology. When Sarah and Greg received the call, they were taken aback. It was one thing to be involved with rockets, but medical technology? They hadn't even considered that possibility. "Gavin," Sarah said softly one morning, after reading the letter from the medical team, "they want you to help them create a device that can save lives. It's for people who have heart problems, and they think your way of thinking might be able to help them." Gavin's eyes sparkled with interest. "Saving people's hearts?" he asked, as if the idea was the most exciting thing he'd ever heard. "I think I can help." And so, Gavin's next journey began, not in the realm of space travel but in the realm of life-saving technology. His gift for understanding systems, for seeing connections where others saw only complexity, was beginning to change the way people thought about medical innovation. What Gavin had started, his approach to problem-solving, his ability to simplify the most complicated of systems, was now beginning to ripple through industries in ways they never imagined. He wasn't just solving puzzles for fun anymore. He was changing the world, one solution at a time. The medical team, eager to get Gavin involved, wasted no time. Within days, they arranged for him to meet with Dr. Elizabeth Vance, a renowned cardiologist whose breakthrough research had revolutionized heart surgery techniques. She had been skeptical at first about reaching out to a 4-year-old boy, but after hearing about Gavin's success with SpaceX, she couldn't ignore the possibility that his unconventional approach might be the key to unlocking something monumental. Sarah and Greg had their reservations. They knew how much pressure their son was already under, but Gavin seemed genuinely excited by the challenge. To him, the idea of helping someone's heart seemed as natural as helping a rocket fly. The complexity of the human body fascinated him in the same way the stars had once captured his attention. To him, the heart wasn't just an organ, it was another puzzle, waiting to be solved. The meeting took place at a state-of-the-art medical facility just outside of San Francisco, where the research team had been tirelessly working on the next generation of heart devices. Dr. Vance met them at the door, a tall, composed woman in her early 40s with sharp eyes that betrayed her focus. She had seen more than her fair share of miracles in the medical field, but nothing like this, nothing that a 4-year-old boy could accomplish. "Welcome, Gavin," she said with a warm smile. "We are so grateful that you're here." Gavin's usual shyness around new people melted away as he looked around the room, his eyes scanning the advanced equipment, the images of the heart on the walls, and the complex diagrams spread across the tables. His curiosity kicked into overdrive. "Is this a heart?" Gavin asked, pointing to a 3D model of the human heart on the table in front of him. It was intricately designed, showing every artery and vein in detail. Dr. Vance chuckled softly. "Yes, it is. But it's not just any heart. This is the model we use to help us understand how we can improve heart surgeries. But we're having trouble with one thing." "What's the problem?" Gavin asked, a little tilt to his head that showed his mind was already piecing things together. "Well, we need to find a way to treat heart conditions in patients without having to cut them open. The surgery is risky, and the recovery time is long. We want a way to treat the heart from the inside, without a major incision," Dr. Vance explained. Gavin thought for a moment, his eyes narrowing in concentration as he looked at the model. You need to find a way to fix the problem, but you don't want to open it up, right?" "That's right," Dr. Vance said, impressed by how quickly Gavin had grasped the issue. "We're looking for a new approach that doesn't involve invasive surgery. We want a way to reach the heart and repair it without opening the chest." Gavin's mind raced as he examined the heart model, his small fingers tracing the intricate pathways of the arteries and veins. He moved around the table, muttering softly to himself as he thought through various ideas. His brain was processing, calculating, drawing connections that the adults in the room couldn't even begin to understand. "I think, what if you could use something small, like a robot or a little tool, to go inside and fix it?" Gavin asked, his eyes lighting up with excitement. Dr. Vance leaned in, intrigued. What kind of tool are you thinking of? Like a tiny spaceship, Gavin replied, that could go inside the veins and arteries and fix things. It could be really small and go through like a tube, kind of like how rockets fly through space. Then it could stop at the heart and fix it. The room fell silent. Dr. Vance exchanged a quick glance with the engineers and scientists standing nearby. Gavin's suggestion was nothing short of revolutionary. A tiny, robot-like device traveling through the body to treat the heart without needing to open the chest. It was the kind of idea that could change everything. You're talking about a minimally invasive surgical tool, Dr. Vance said, her voice filled with awe. But one that doesn't just repair tissue, it actively solves the problem from the inside, without anyone ever having to open the body. Yes, Gavin replied simply. A little spaceship. Like the rockets I build, but for inside the body. Sarah and Greg exchanged looks of amazement. The simplicity of Gavin's idea was staggering. He wasn't just suggesting a solution, he was imagining something that could completely shift the way medicine was practiced. A tiny spacecraft designed not for the vastness of space, but for the intricate and delicate workings of the human body. It was a wild idea, but for Gavin, it made perfect sense. Dr. Vance's mind was racing. She had seen thousands of innovative proposals over the years, but this one was different. This was the mind of a child who had seen possibilities where others had seen only obstacles. But more than that, Gavin had the ability to look at something as complex as the human body and see it not as a series of impossible challenges but as a puzzle to be solved. For the next few hours, Gavin sat with Dr. Vance and her team, sketching out his vision. He didn't have the technical knowledge of an adult engineer, but he had the creativity of someone who wasn't bound by traditional thinking. He showed them how his spacecraft could move through the body, how it could use tiny, precise movements to repair the heart, and how it could be operated with a small incision rather than the huge one required for traditional surgery. It was all theoretical, of course. The technology didn't exist yet. But Gavin's idea had given the team a glimpse into the future. It wasn't just about fixing a heart anymore, it was about redefining what was possible in the world of medicine. Over the next few weeks, Gavin worked alongside the team, helping them refine the concept. While he didn't fully understand the technical details, he was able to offer his perspective, his uncanny ability to make complex ideas seem simple and achievable. He could look at a problem from an angle no one else had considered and propose a solution that felt obvious in hindsight. As the weeks turned into months, the tiny spacecraft that Gavin had dreamed up slowly began to take shape. Engineers and doctors alike marveled at how the concept had evolved. What had started as a child's playful idea was now on the cusp of becoming a groundbreaking medical device. Gavin was thrilled by the progress, but he didn't seem to grasp the magnitude of what he had started. For him, it was just another puzzle, another challenge to solve. And as he continued to help shape the device, he remained the same curious, joyful boy who had built rockets with Legos and asked questions that no one else had thought to ask. But for the rest of the world, Gavin's work had become something much more than that. It wasn't just about fixing hearts, it was about unlocking a future where innovation was only limited by imagination. And Gavin was just getting started. As Gavin's involvement with the medical device progressed, his reputation continued to grow. The tiny spacecraft he had envisioned to treat heart conditions without surgery had become something real, something tangible. It was no longer just a concept, it was a prototype. And soon, it would begin clinical trials that could change the face of medicine forever. But for Gavin, it was just another interesting puzzle. As he watched the team work to bring his idea to life, he remained as focused as ever on his next challenge. While he had been working with the doctors and engineers on the heart device, Gavin's world was still very much tied to rockets and SpaceX. His passion for space exploration had not waned, it was an essential part of who he was. And although his fame had spread across the world, it was still the stars that called to him the most. He loved seeing rockets take off, hearing about missions to Mars, and imagining what lay beyond the vast black sky. Gavin's parents had noticed a change in him lately. He seemed more introspective, his mind often wandering off as he stared out at the night sky. Sometimes, it felt like he was getting lost in a world they couldn't follow. One evening, Sarah found Gavin sitting by the window, staring up at the stars. His brow was furrowed, his small hands resting on the windowsill. "Gavin?" she asked softly, sitting down beside him. "What are you thinking about?" Gavin didn't look at her immediately. Instead, he pointed to the sky, his finger tracing an invisible line from one star to another. "I'm thinking about how far those stars are," he said quietly. "How far they are from us, from here. I know we're working on rockets that can take us far, but I wonder, if we can ever reach all the way to the stars." Sarah smiled gently, feeling a pang of pride and sadness at the same time. Her son wasn't just a boy with extraordinary abilities, he was still a child with big dreams and boundless curiosity. "I think we'll get there one day," she replied, her voice full of warmth. "Maybe not in our lifetime, but someone will. People like you, Gavin, are going to help make that happen." Gavin nodded, but he still seemed lost in thought. "But what if we're meant to go even farther? What if there's something out there that we can't even imagine?" Sarah felt a chill run through her as she considered his words. Gavin's brilliance had often led him to ask questions that no one else dared to ask. But this question felt different. It wasn't just a curiosity about space, it was an existential question, one that touched on the very limits of human potential. "You mean, beyond what we can see now?" Sarah asked carefully. "Beyond everything," Gavin replied with certainty, his voice steady, as though he already knew the answer. "What if we're meant to do more than just visit the stars? What if we're supposed to find something new out there? Something no one has ever seen before?" There was something haunting about the way Gavin said it, as if his mind had already glimpsed the future, a future where humans had evolved into something far beyond the world they knew now. Sarah didn't know whether to be thrilled or terrified by the thought. But one thing was for certain, Gavin had already moved past the boundaries of the ordinary world. He was thinking about a future that most people hadn't even begun to imagine. As the weeks passed, Gavin's thoughts on space grew more profound. His involvement with SpaceX deepened. He had become more than just a consultant or a child prodigy, he was now a core part of the team, brainstorming ideas that could take humanity farther than ever before. It was during one of these sessions that Elon Musk, ever the visionary, pulled Gavin aside. Musk had been following Gavin's work closely, his contributions to SpaceX had been instrumental in several key projects, but now Elon had something bigger in mind. "Gavin," Elon said, his voice filled with excitement. "I've been thinking. We're getting closer to Mars, closer to the moon. But what about the outer planets? What about exploring the unknown?" Gavin's eyes lit up. He had always dreamed of going beyond Mars, beyond the familiar. "You mean, like going to Jupiter, or Saturn?" "Yes," Elon said, his voice lowering with intensity. "But what if I told you there's something out there even farther than that? Something we've never been able to reach, something that could change everything we know about the universe?" Gavin sat up straighter, his mind already racing ahead. "What is it?" Elon smiled, a glint of excitement in his eyes. "I can't tell you everything just yet, but let's just say, there's a mission in the works, a mission that could be the greatest leap forward for humanity. And I think you might be the one to help us get there." Gavin's heart pounded with excitement. A new mission. Something bigger than Mars, bigger than any space mission they had ever considered. The possibilities were endless. For Gavin, this was the ultimate puzzle, the final frontier. And if anyone was going to help humanity take that next leap, it would be him. As the days went by, Gavin worked tirelessly with Elon and the SpaceX team, laying the groundwork for what would become humanity's most ambitious mission to date. The mission was shrouded in secrecy, only a select few knew the full details, but Gavin was more determined than ever. He was no longer just a boy helping to build rockets, he was helping to chart a course for the future of humanity. But it wasn't just about rockets or space travel anymore. It was about something far greater, the future of the human race, the survival of mankind, and the exploration of a universe that was still largely unknown. Gavin's role in the mission was crucial. His ability to think outside the box, to envision solutions to problems that no one else could see, was exactly what SpaceX needed. But as much as he enjoyed the challenge, there was a part of him that still wondered about the stars. What lay beyond them? What had Elon meant by something we've never been able to reach? He couldn't help but wonder if the answer lay beyond the stars themselves, out in the vast, uncharted expanse of space, waiting for someone brave enough to seek it. Weeks passed by, and Gavin's life was filled with a steady rhythm of scientific breakthroughs, meetings with engineers, and endless calculations. The new mission that Elon Musk had hinted at was becoming more real every day, though the details remained a carefully guarded secret. Gavin, despite his youth, was deeply involved in the planning stages. He had always been a quick learner, but now, surrounded by the brightest minds in aerospace engineering and technology, he was diving into uncharted territory. The project had grown beyond just another space mission, it had become something that the world had never seen before. The scale of the task was immense. It wasn't simply about reaching the next planet or setting foot on another moon, it was about venturing into the unknown reaches of space, beyond the planets, beyond the asteroid belts, where no human had ever gone before. It was early one morning when Gavin's parents received a call that would change their lives forever. Gavin had been working with the team, solving problems that even the most experienced engineers struggled with, when Elon Musk walked into the room, his face serious but filled with excitement. "Gavin," Elon began, "I think it's time we show you something." Gavin looked up, his eyes wide with curiosity. "Show me what?" Without another word, Elon motioned for him to follow. Gavin, always eager for new discoveries, jumped to his feet. Sarah and Greg, who had been sitting quietly in the observation room, exchanged glances but said nothing. They had long ago learned to trust in Gavin's instincts, even if those instincts led him to the most extraordinary places. Elon led them down a series of hallways to a secured, high-tech lab where a large screen displayed detailed data and images of a deep space anomaly, something beyond the known universe. "We've been monitoring this for a while now," Elon said, his voice lowering. "It's something we've never seen before, and we believe it could hold the key to something much greater." Gavin's eyes scanned the screen. The anomaly was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was an irregularly shaped mass floating in the farthest reaches of space, its surface shimmering with a strange energy. Data from probes that had come close to it showed unusual readings, energy patterns that didn't fit any known scientific theory. "It's a mystery," Elon continued. "It defies everything we know about the cosmos. We're not sure what it is, but we have a hypothesis. It could be an ancient relic, something from a long-lost civilization. Or, it could be something else entirely, something new, something beyond our comprehension." Gavin's fingers hovered over the keyboard, analyzing the data that the team had gathered. His brain was working at full speed, processing every piece of information with the precision of a seasoned scientist. He tapped a few keys, pulling up more data, trying to find a pattern. His small brow furrowed as he examined the anomaly, considering every possibility, every angle. "This could be like a treasure chest," Gavin said slowly, his voice filled with wonder. "But we don't know what's inside yet." Elon nodded. "Exactly. And I think you're the one who can help us figure it out." The implications of what Elon was saying were staggering. This was no ordinary mission, it wasn't just about going to space. This was about solving one of the greatest mysteries the universe had ever presented. And Gavin, at only 4 years old, had already shown an uncanny ability to think in ways that no one else could. The team knew that without him, they might never crack the code. The plan was set in motion immediately. Gavin would be a central part of the mission team, though it would take time for the technology to catch up to his vision. They would need to design a new spacecraft, one capable of reaching the anomaly, studying it up close, and collecting data that could answer the questions that had baffled humanity for centuries. As they moved forward, the mission took shape, a new fleet of spacecraft, each designed to navigate through space in ways that had never been tried before. They would need to be equipped with new, cutting-edge technology, tools that would allow them to study the anomaly without disturbing it, and most importantly, the ability to survive in the hostile environment of deep space. Gavin's role was to help shape the future of the mission, guiding the engineers and scientists through the unknown with his creativity and instinctive grasp of concepts that others struggled to comprehend. His mind was a treasure trove of ideas, each more brilliant than the last. He wasn't just helping to build the spacecraft, he was helping to build humanity's future in space. But there was one question that lingered in the back of everyone's mind: what was the anomaly? And what did it mean for the future of the human race? As the days turned into weeks, Gavin's understanding of the mission deepened. He worked tirelessly with the team, bouncing ideas off them, tweaking designs, and pushing boundaries. But for all the progress they made, they were still faced with the enigma of the anomaly. No one could answer the most important question: what was it, and what did it want from them? One night, as Gavin lay in bed, he couldn't stop thinking about the mystery. His mind raced, as it often did, trying to piece together the puzzle that seemed just out of reach. He closed his eyes, visualizing the anomaly in his mind, the shimmering energy, the patterns, the unknown. What if it's a message? Gavin whispered to himself, as if the idea had suddenly struck him like a bolt of lightning. What if it's waiting for us to decode it? His words hung in the air like a question that only the stars could answer. Was it possible? Could this anomaly be some kind of message from another civilization, or perhaps something even more ancient, something beyond their understanding? The more Gavin thought about it, the more convinced he became that the answer lay not in technology, but in something deeper. It was about understanding the message, deciphering the language of the universe itself. And for that, they needed more than just machines, they needed a new way of thinking. Gavin had always approached challenges with the curiosity of a child, but now he realized that the true answer might not lie in complex equations or advanced spacecraft. The key could be simpler than that. The key could be in the way they saw the universe, in the questions they dared to ask, in the way they were willing to look at the stars with fresh eyes. With a newfound sense of purpose, Gavin went to sleep that night, knowing that tomorrow would bring them one step closer to unlocking the greatest mystery of all. The following weeks were a blur of activity. Gavin, still young but incredibly gifted, found himself at the heart of the project. It had become more than just a mission, it was a race against time to uncover the unknown. His involvement was no longer just as a curious observer. He was now considered the cornerstone of the mission, the one whose ideas were helping to guide the team to answers that had previously seemed beyond reach. The anomaly that had captured everyone's imagination and curiosity remained a constant presence in their minds. What was it? What could it be? Each new piece of data that came in seemed to add more confusion rather than clarity. The closer they got to the unknown, the farther it seemed to drift away. Despite all the complexity surrounding the mission, Gavin remained remarkably calm. There was an energy about him that was undeniable, a focus that kept him grounded even when the whole world seemed to be watching. Elon Musk, the ever-driven leader of SpaceX, had taken an unusual liking to Gavin's approach to problem-solving. He often said that Gavin was the missing link between human ingenuity and the vast, uncharted universe they were trying to conquer. One afternoon, as the team gathered in the planning room, Elon addressed them. "We've made significant progress, but we need to consider every possibility," he said. His face, usually filled with unshakable confidence, now showed signs of uncertainty. "Gavin, I want you to take the lead in analyzing the latest data. We're looking for something we missed, a breakthrough moment." Gavin stood at the center of the room, surrounded by screens displaying endless streams of data. But his mind wasn't on the numbers. He had learned a long time ago that answers weren't always hidden in the data itself. Sometimes, the key lay in something deeper, something that couldn't be measured in equations or formulas. His gaze shifted to the large holographic map of the anomaly. The shimmering lights of the unknown danced like stars, but there was something more to it, something elusive that tugged at him. "I think we're looking at this the wrong way," Gavin finally said, breaking the silence. His voice was calm but filled with the kind of certainty that often came only after much contemplation. Everyone in the room turned to him, startled by the boldness of his statement. Even Elon, who was used to being the one who pushed boundaries, seemed intrigued. "What do you mean?" Elon asked, leaning forward. Gavin pointed to the hologram, his finger tracing a path through the swirling energy. "I've been thinking about the anomaly in terms of space and time, but what if it's not about that at all? What if it's about the way we perceive information?" There was a quiet pause as everyone processed his words. It was a theory that felt like a step outside the box, even by SpaceX standards. "You're suggesting it's not a physical object?" one of the engineers asked, his brow furrowed. "No," Gavin said, shaking his head. "What if it's something we've been trying to measure in terms that don't apply to it? Something that exists outside the space we know, outside of time even. What if it's trying to communicate with us, not in ways we understand, but in a way that we've yet to discover?" Elon seemed to absorb Gavin's words, his eyes narrowing in thought. "You mean, like a message?" Gavin nodded. "Exactly. It could be waiting for us to figure out how to decode it. What if this isn't about just reaching it physically, but about understanding the language of the universe itself?" The room was filled with murmurs as the team digested what Gavin had said. For a moment, there was silence. Then Elon stood up, his mind racing with possibilities. "This is big," he said, pacing back and forth. "If we're not just dealing with a physical phenomenon but something that exists on another level, something beyond our understanding, then we need to rethink everything. We need to stop thinking of it as an object in space and start thinking of it as something else entirely." Gavin's hypothesis changed the trajectory of the mission. They began to look at the data differently, no longer focusing solely on the physical measurements, but also on the patterns, the waves, and the signals that had previously seemed random. They started exploring new ways to communicate with the anomaly, ways that involved not just technology but an entirely new framework for understanding the universe. It wasn't long before they developed a plan, a bold, unprecedented plan. The team would design a probe capable of interpreting and transmitting the data from the anomaly in a way that mimicked human thought and communication. They would attempt to send signals, not just to measure the anomaly, but to engage with it, to establish a form of communication. For Gavin, it felt like the next logical step. He had always believed that the answers to the universe's greatest mysteries weren't just about technology, they were about the questions humans asked. What was the anomaly trying to tell them? Why had it appeared now, at this exact moment in time? The probe, now dubbed the Sentinel, was a marvel of technology. It was equipped with artificial intelligence that was designed to interpret complex patterns and signals in ways that no human mind could. Its design was based on Gavin's understanding of how the human brain processed information, focusing on intuition, emotion, and thought, rather than just data. The day the Sentinel was ready for launch, the team gathered together at the SpaceX headquarters. There was a sense of anticipation in the air, but also a palpable tension. No one knew if this was going to work. The Sentinel was humanity's first attempt to engage with the unknown, and no one could predict how the anomaly would respond. Gavin stood at the control center, his hands resting lightly on the console. His mind was quiet, focused. He wasn't nervous, but there was a deep sense of awe as the countdown began. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. With a soft hum, the Sentinel ignited and began its journey toward the anomaly. "Launch successful," one of the engineers called out, and a cheer spread through the room. But Gavin remained still, his eyes fixed on the screens. He knew this was only the beginning. The Sentinel was just the first step. The real challenge lay ahead, decoding whatever the anomaly was trying to communicate. Whatever it was, it had been waiting for humanity to reach out. And Gavin, the 4-year-old genius, knew that this was just the beginning of something far bigger than anyone could possibly imagine. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough. The days following the launch of the Sentinel were a whirlwind. The probe had successfully left Earth's atmosphere, heading toward the mysterious anomaly at the farthest reaches of space. Every scientist and engineer involved in the project was holding their breath, waiting to see if their efforts would bear fruit. But as the probe sailed further away, the uncertainty remained. Would the anomaly respond? Would their leap of faith pay off? Gavin, however, remained as calm as ever. Despite being just 4 years old, his understanding of the situation seemed deeper than anyone had expected. It was almost as if he instinctively knew that this was more than just a mission, it was a turning point in human history. As the Sentinel moved deeper into space, Gavin spent hours at the control center, watching the feed from the probe. The large screens flickered with images of distant stars and planets, but there was still no sign of a response from the anomaly. For a while, everything was silent, just the hum of machinery and the occasional beep of a status update. But then, something changed. It was subtle at first. The screens that once displayed nothing but empty space began to pulse with light. Faint at first, but growing stronger with each passing moment. The anomaly was reacting to the Sentinel. Gavin's eyes widened in excitement, though he didn't express it in the way most would. His calm demeanor remained, but there was an undeniable spark of curiosity in his gaze. Elon Musk, who had been pacing nervously behind him, stopped. "It's happening," he whispered. The team gathered around, watching as the data began to stream in. The signals from the anomaly were unlike anything anyone had ever seen. It wasn't a typical transmission, there were no familiar patterns or recognizable frequencies. It was as if the anomaly itself was trying to communicate, but in a language that was beyond the limits of human understanding. Gavin's mind raced, processing the incoming data. He had always been quick, but now, in the face of the greatest challenge he had ever encountered, he felt an entirely new level of clarity. "It's not just a signal," Gavin said, his voice soft but certain. It's alive." The room fell silent as everyone turned to him. The idea was absurd. How could something inanimate, something as distant as a cosmic anomaly, be alive? But Gavin's words hung in the air like a challenge. Could it be that the anomaly was more than just a random phenomenon? Was it, in fact, some form of intelligence? "I think it's trying to tell us something," Gavin continued. "Look at the way the signals are shifting. They're not random, they're responding to our probe. It's like it's learning, adapting." Elon's brow furrowed in thought. "Are you saying it's communicating with us?" "Yes," Gavin replied, his eyes never leaving the screen. "But not with words. With patterns. It's using frequencies, wavelengths, and energy. We need to figure out how to decode it." The idea was revolutionary, but also terrifying. For centuries, humanity had searched the stars for signs of life, but now it seemed that they had found something that was not just alive, but actively engaging with them. It was no longer a question of if the anomaly was a message, but how to decipher what it was trying to say. For days, Gavin worked tirelessly with the team, analyzing the signals from the anomaly. They tried every method they could think of, analyzing frequency patterns, testing different algorithms, and applying every piece of knowledge they had about space communication. But the anomaly's signals remained elusive, like a puzzle with no solution. It was on the 7th day after the Sentinel had made its first contact that Gavin had a breakthrough. He had been sitting alone in the observation room, staring at the data for hours. The signals were like a maze, complex and intricate, but still within reach. There was something about the patterns that seemed familiar to him, though he couldn't quite put his finger on it. He leaned in closer, running his small fingers over the holographic display, and then, suddenly, it clicked. The signals weren't just random, they were structured. They were based on a series of repeating patterns, almost like a rhythm. It wasn't a spoken language, but it was a language nonetheless. It was as if the anomaly was speaking in waves of energy that conveyed meaning through their frequency and modulation. Gavin's heart raced as he realized what he had discovered. The signals weren't meant to be decoded like a traditional language. They were a form of communication that transcended language itself. It was a language of the universe, a pattern that could be understood not by words, but by the connection of energy. He quickly called over the team. Elon was the first to arrive, followed by the lead engineers and scientists. "What have you found?" Elon asked, his voice filled with anticipation. "I think I know how to decode it," Gavin said, his eyes wide with excitement. "The anomaly isn't just sending random signals. It's sending us a message through the patterns of energy. It's like a song, a universal rhythm. We need to find the key to it." Elon stared at the screen, then back at Gavin. "You mean, this whole time, it was trying to communicate with us using sound waves? Energy patterns?" Gavin nodded. "Yes. It's more than just a signal. It's a form of communication that we've never considered before. If we can unlock the rhythm, we can understand it." The team sprang into action, working around the clock to create a system that could interpret the energy patterns. Using Gavin's insight, they began to filter the signals through various models, testing different frequencies, searching for resonance, and using their new understanding of the anomaly structure. Hours turned into days, and days turned into weeks. Finally, on the 15th day after the initial contact, something extraordinary happened. The energy patterns on the screen began to align, matching Gavin's predictions. Slowly, the team began to hear something, faint at first, like the soft hum of a distant melody. It wasn't music, not exactly, but it was a rhythm that reverberated through the cosmos. And then, the message became clear. The anomaly wasn't just a strange object in space, it was a conduit for something far greater. It was a bridge, a link to an intelligence that had been waiting for humanity to reach it. The message was clear, though it wasn't spoken in words. It was a message of hope, a reminder that the universe was not as vast and empty as it seemed. It was alive, filled with patterns, energy, and life beyond anything humanity had imagined. And as Gavin stood before the screens, watching the patterns unfold, he realized that this was only the beginning. The anomaly had sent its message, but the true understanding, the real answers, were still out there, waiting for them to discover. This was the moment when humanity would learn that the universe was far more connected, far more alive, than they had ever believed. And Gavin, the 4-year-old genius, was the key to unlocking its greatest mysteries. The world was watching, waiting for a breakthrough. Gavin's discovery had set off a chain reaction, a sense of urgency and excitement rippling through the scientific community, across the globe. The anomaly, once thought to be a mere enigma of space, was now a tangible mystery. The message it was sending, a rhythmic pattern of energy, was beyond anything anyone had expected. It was as if a cosmic thread had been pulled, unraveling a deeper layer of the universe itself. The team at SpaceX worked tirelessly, day and night, attempting to interpret the significance of the energy patterns. But as the days passed, something began to gnaw at Gavin. The anomaly was responding to them, yes, but there was more to it, something that didn't sit right. It wasn't just the signal itself, it was how the anomaly was acting. The patterns were changing. Each time they thought they had unlocked a piece of the puzzle, it would shift again, becoming more complex, more intricate. It was almost as if it were testing them, pushing them to think harder, to evolve faster. One late night, as Gavin sat alone in the observation room, he noticed something strange. The energy pattern on the screen began to shift again, but this time, there was something more to it. The rhythm was still there, but it was slower now, more deliberate. He leaned in closer, his fingers brushing the surface of the console. It was as if the anomaly was speaking directly to him, through the pulse of energy. His mind raced, piecing together what he had seen in the last few days. Something about the energy waves felt familiar. And then, as if in a moment of clarity, Gavin realized what was happening. It's not just a rhythm, he whispered to himself. It's a story. The realization hit him like a wave. The anomaly wasn't just sending a series of random signals or patterns. It was telling them something, a story, a narrative woven into the very fabric of the energy waves. A cosmic tale that transcended time and space. The anomaly was speaking in the universal language of story. He quickly ran to find Elon. Gavin's discovery was more than just a breakthrough in understanding the anomaly, it was the key to unlocking the next phase of their mission. He knew that this wasn't just about technology anymore. This was about connection. The anomaly wasn't just waiting for them to decode its signals, it was waiting for them to understand its purpose. Elon was in his office, going over the latest reports when Gavin burst in. Gavin? Elon looked up, surprised by the urgency in his voice. What is it? You look excited. Gavin nodded, his eyes wide with excitement. It's not just energy patterns. It's a story. The anomaly is sending us a message, but it's not one we've ever encountered before. It's telling us something, a cosmic narrative. Elon's face lit up. A story? But how? How can it communicate like that? I don't know yet, Gavin admitted, his mind racing. But I think we're looking at this all wrong. It's not a code to decipher or an algorithm to crack. It's a language of the universe. A language of connection. I think the anomaly is trying to show us something bigger. Something about the universe itself. Elon stood up, his curiosity piqued. What do you mean? Gavin took a deep breath, trying to gather his thoughts. What if the universe communicates through stories? Not just through data, not just through equations. But through narrative. Through the patterns of energy. What if the anomaly is trying to tell us about the universe's history, about the cosmos itself, and our place within it? Elon's expression softened as he absorbed Gavin's words. It was an idea so radical, so far beyond anything they had considered, that it took a moment to sink in. But as the idea began to take root, Elon realized that Gavin might be onto something. After all, humans had always told stories to make sense of their world. It only made sense that the universe might communicate in a similar way. I see, Elon said, nodding slowly. If this is true, then the anomaly isn't just trying to communicate with us on a scientific level. It's trying to share its story, its history, with us. And maybe, just maybe, it's waiting for us to understand it in a way we've never considered. Gavin nodded. Exactly. The energy patterns are like chapters of a book. Each one revealing a new part of the story. But we need to understand the context. We need to find the rhythm, the flow of the narrative. Only then can we understand what it's trying to show us. The next several weeks were filled with a sense of quiet determination. The team at SpaceX focused all their energy on decoding the story within the anomaly's signals. They studied the rhythmic patterns with a new sense of purpose, knowing that this wasn't just about science or technology. It was about unraveling the deepest secrets of the universe, secrets that had been hidden for millennia. As they worked, they began to realize that the story the anomaly was telling wasn't one of destruction or chaos. It was a story of creation, of life, and of the interconnectedness of all things. The anomaly, it seemed, was showing them the intricate web of existence, the dance of energy and matter, the birth and death of stars, the cycles of life that spanned galaxies. And in the midst of all this, the anomaly was also showing them their place in the grand story. Humanity wasn't separate from the universe, it was part of it, woven into the fabric of existence. The story wasn't just about the past or the future. It was about the present, about the moment when humans first reached out to the cosmos and asked the most important question of all. What is our place in this vast, mysterious universe? The answer was there, hidden within the rhythm of the anomaly's energy. It wasn't a simple answer, but it was a profound one. Humanity was part of the story, and the story was still being written. The anomaly wasn't just a message, it was a guide, a beacon leading them forward. Gavin, the 4-year-old genius, had shown them the way. And in doing so, he had revealed the most important truth of all, that the universe was not a cold, indifferent place, but a living, breathing story, waiting to be discovered. As the weeks turned into months, the journey into the heart of the anomaly became less about science and more about something deeper. The team at SpaceX, under the direction of Elon Musk and guided by Gavin's unique insights, continued to decipher the rhythmic energy patterns. The more they studied, the more they realized that the anomaly was not simply transmitting information, but rather inviting them to understand the universe's most profound secrets. The signals had shifted from being mere data points to something more, a cosmic symphony. They were no longer dealing with just waves of energy but with something that resonated on a level beyond human comprehension. It was a heartbeat, a pulse, a rhythm that connected everything in the universe. And it was clear that the anomaly was trying to teach them how to hear it, how to tune into the frequency of the cosmos. Gavin had become the linchpin of the operation. Despite his age, he had an intuitive grasp of the patterns that no one else could see. His ability to decipher the cosmic rhythms and match them with patterns of nature was uncanny. But what truly set him apart was his unwavering faith in the interconnectedness of everything. While others might have seen the anomaly as an isolated event, Gavin understood that it was part of something far larger. It was not just a message, it was an invitation. An invitation to understand that the universe itself was alive and in constant communication. Elon, who had been skeptical at first, found himself drawn into the mystery. He began to see that this wasn't just a technological breakthrough, it was a philosophical one. If the universe could communicate through energy, through rhythm, what did that mean for humanity? Were they simply passive observers, or was this their moment to engage in a deeper dialogue with the cosmos? The question gnawed at him, and one evening, as he sat with Gavin in the observation room, he finally spoke it aloud. What if we're not just meant to decode this message? Elon said quietly, looking at the pulse on the screen. What if the anomaly is asking us to become part of the story? What if it's inviting us to write our own chapter? Gavin looked up at him, his large eyes filled with understanding. I think it is, he replied simply. The universe is telling us that we're not separate from it. We're part of it. And we can choose how to play our role. Elon's mind raced. Could it be true? Had they discovered a deeper truth about existence? Was humanity destined to be more than just spectators in the grand play of the cosmos? Before Elon could say anything else, a sudden fluctuation in the signal caused the room to go silent. The pulse on the screen had intensified, almost as if the anomaly was reaching out to them with greater urgency. Gavin's face lit up, and he ran his fingers across the console, adjusting the settings. Something's changing, Gavin murmured, his voice a mix of excitement and awe. The anomaly, it's evolving. Elon and the rest of the team gathered around, watching the feed with bated breath. The rhythmic pulse, which had once been a simple pattern, was now growing more complex. The waves of energy were changing in ways they hadn't expected, adapting as if the anomaly was responding to their attempts to understand it. It's like it's testing us, Gavin said. It's trying to see if we're ready to move forward. To join it. Elon couldn't help but be struck by the depth of Gavin's words. The child had become more than just a genius, he had become the bridge between humanity and the universe. And now, as the signals grew more intricate, more complex, it was clear that the anomaly was not only inviting them to understand but to become part of something much greater. Days passed, and the team continued to monitor the changes. The energy patterns fluctuated, sometimes intensifying, sometimes fading into silence. It was as if the anomaly was trying to communicate in waves, sending bursts of information, only to retreat and then return with more complexity. Each time the signal changed, Gavin was the first to notice. He began to identify patterns within the fluctuations, sequences of events that seemed to follow a natural progression, like a story unfolding before their eyes. But these weren't ordinary sequences. These were universal truths, hidden within the energy waves. It wasn't just about communication anymore. The anomaly was sharing something far deeper. It was showing them the laws of the universe in a way that defied traditional understanding. The energy pulses were not merely information, they were revelations. They were offering the team a chance to perceive reality itself in a new light, to understand the very fabric of existence. One day, after an especially intense burst of energy from the anomaly, Gavin spoke up again, his voice filled with awe. "It's showing us how everything is connected," he said. "The stars, the planets, the people, it's all part of the same pulse. The universe isn't just a collection of random events. It's a rhythm. A harmony." Elon looked at him, his mind racing. Could it be true? Was the universe truly a living, breathing entity, pulsating with energy and meaning? Was this how everything worked? Gavin continued, his eyes distant as if he were hearing something beyond the physical world. "The anomaly is showing us that everything we know, everything we've ever known, is just part of a bigger story. And that story isn't finished. We're just beginning to understand it. And we're not the only ones. There's more out there. More stories. More connections." The room fell into a heavy silence as the weight of Gavin's words sank in. They were standing on the edge of something incredible, something far beyond their comprehension. But Gavin seemed at peace with it, as if he already understood that this was just the next chapter in a much larger tale. The next few days were filled with breakthroughs. The team began to decode the anomaly's pulses with increasing accuracy, and what they found was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The messages from the anomaly weren't just about the past or present, they were also about the future. The energy pulses revealed glimpses of events yet to come, as if the anomaly was offering a glimpse into the timeline of the universe itself. Gavin, once again, was the key. He seemed to understand the rhythms of the universe in a way no one else could. He would sit for hours, listening to the energy pulses, his small hands tracing patterns in the air, as if he were conducting a symphony of the cosmos. "It's not about us," Gavin said one evening, looking up from his work. "It's about the universe. It's trying to help us see that we're all part of it. All connected." Elon nodded slowly. "And if we understand that connection, we can begin to play our part in the story." As the days passed, the team at SpaceX made the most important decision of their lives. They would no longer be passive participants in the universe's story. They would engage with it. They would listen to its rhythm, understand its patterns, and seek to fulfill their role in the grand narrative. And so, with Gavin's guidance, the journey continued, deeper into the heart of the anomaly, deeper into the cosmic pulse that resonated through the very fabric of reality. What lay ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: humanity was no longer a bystander in the universe's grand symphony. They were a part of it. As the days blurred into one another, the team's connection to the anomaly deepened. The cosmic rhythm had evolved beyond an enigma, it had become a living part of their lives. Each pulse, each wave of energy, felt like a heartbeat, not just of the universe, but of their own understanding. They were no longer just studying a phenomenon, they were beginning to resonate with it. Gavin, now firmly at the center of the team, had become the key to unlocking the mystery. His intuitive grasp of the energy patterns had transformed the team's work. What had once seemed like isolated bursts of data now appeared to be pieces of a much larger puzzle, one that connected the past, the present, and the future in ways they had never imagined. But as they delved deeper, something else emerged, something unexpected. The anomaly wasn't just showing them glimpses of the future, it was echoing fragments of the past, pieces of a history that seemed long forgotten. One morning, as Gavin and the team gathered around the observation room, they noticed a strange change in the pulse. The pattern had shifted dramatically. It was no longer the same rhythmic pulse they had grown accustomed to, now, it was jagged, erratic, like a distorted memory. Gavin immediately recognized the change. His eyes widened as he stared at the screen. It's like an echo," he whispered. "It's showing us something from before. A memory." Elon looked up from his console, his brow furrowing. "A memory? From when?" "From before we even knew what this anomaly was," Gavin explained, his voice trembling with excitement. This isn't just a cosmic rhythm. It's showing us pieces of history, of events that happened long ago." The pulse intensified, each wave growing more distorted as the anomaly seemed to reach into the past, pulling fragments of forgotten moments from the fabric of spacetime. The energy patterns flickered, revealing images, hazy, fragmented visions of something ancient. Strange shapes, unfamiliar landscapes, and, most startling of all, beings. Not human, but something else, something far older. It's like a message buried in time, Gavin continued. The anomaly isn't just transmitting data. It's trying to remind us of something. Something that happened long before we ever existed. Elon felt a chill run down his spine. Could it be? Could the anomaly be reaching across time, to reveal something humanity had long since forgotten? They worked tirelessly to interpret the messages, piecing together the fragments of history the anomaly was presenting. The images were vague, blurry at first, but slowly, they began to take shape. Strange symbols appeared, symbols that seemed familiar, yet alien. They were like hieroglyphs, cryptic and ancient, but still carrying meaning. The ancient civilizations, Elon murmured, his mind racing. Could this be related to the lost histories? The myths of the ancients? What if they had discovered this anomaly long before we did? Gavin nodded, his young mind already making connections. Maybe they tried to understand it, just like we are now. But they couldn't, not in the way we can. We have the technology now. We can see what they saw. And so they began the painstaking process of interpreting these ancient messages. The pulses grew stronger, the echoes clearer, and soon the team was uncovering truths that felt impossibly old. These weren't just random data points, they were clues. Fragments of a civilization that had once thrived, who had encountered the anomaly long before humanity. The messages began to take on a pattern, a sequence, and slowly, they began to tell a story. It was a tale of a forgotten race, an ancient civilization, whose understanding of the universe had far surpassed anything humanity had imagined. They had discovered the cosmic pulse, just as the team had, but their understanding was different. They saw it not just as a signal, but as a bridge to something much greater. As the pulses continued to unfold, one image became clearer than the rest, an image of a massive structure, built in the heart of a distant galaxy. It was an object of immense size, seemingly composed of energy and matter, a construction that defied all human understanding. This could be it, Gavin said, his voice filled with awe. The key. The structure. It's not just an object. It's a gateway. A gateway? Elon asked, incredulous. A gateway to where? To the stars, Gavin answered, his voice trembling with excitement. Maybe even beyond them. This ancient civilization, they weren't just looking for answers. They were trying to find a way to connect, to transcend, to become part of something greater. The structure, this gateway, wasn't just a physical object. It was a door. A door to another realm of existence. The cosmic pulse wasn't just a signal from the past, it was a call to action. A call to find the gateway, to unlock it, and to connect with whatever lay beyond it. The team was left in stunned silence. They had always assumed that humanity's journey to the stars was about exploring the unknown. But what if the unknown wasn't just out there? What if it was already here, waiting for them to recognize it? The anomaly, the cosmic pulse, it was all part of a larger story, one that had been unfolding long before they had ever understood it. Gavin, with his incredible intuition, had uncovered a truth far beyond anyone's expectations. This wasn't just about technology or exploration. It was about understanding the universe on a deeper level, about recognizing that everything, from the stars above to the energy within their own bodies, was connected. But there was still so much they didn't know. The echoes of the past had shown them a glimpse of what was to come, but the full story was still hidden in the vast expanse of the anomaly's energy. What else was it trying to reveal? And what would happen when they finally unlocked the gateway? The team could no longer ignore the implications of their discoveries. The future was no longer a distant, abstract concept, it was an active participant in their quest for understanding. And in that moment, the mission shifted. This wasn't just about answering questions anymore. It was about preparing for something much larger, something that had the potential to change humanity's place in the universe forever. As they continued to piece together the puzzle, the team was acutely aware of one thing: the anomaly wasn't just a scientific breakthrough. It was a calling to understand the universe not as a collection of objects and events, but as a living, breathing entity, filled with stories and connections, just waiting to be discovered. And so, the search continued, deeper into the mystery, deeper into the echoes of the past. The answers were out there, hidden within the cosmic pulse, waiting for humanity to unlock them. As the echoes of the past continued to resonate through their data, a new sense of urgency filled the team at SpaceX. What had once been a quiet curiosity, an enigma on the edge of their understanding, had transformed into something far larger. This was no longer about unraveling the mystery of the anomaly, it was about facing a fundamental shift in the way humanity understood its place in the universe. The revelation that the anomaly was not just a signal but a cosmic gateway had rocked their world. Gavin, still the linchpin of their efforts, had become the bridge between the past and the present, the one who could decipher the messages from long-forgotten civilizations. But now the stakes were higher than ever before. They were on the verge of something unprecedented. The cosmic pulse was not just a message, it was a map, a path leading them towards something far greater than they had ever imagined. What do you think is on the other side? Elon mused, pacing the control room. The team was gathered, staring at the screen that displayed the final image, a structure of unimaginable scale, floating in the heart of a distant galaxy, beyond the reach of human exploration. We don't know, Gavin answered simply. But I think we're about to find out. The gravity of the moment hung heavy in the air. The anomaly had shown them glimpses of this gateway, this ancient structure, but it had never revealed the full picture. It was as though the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for humanity to make its next move. The team continued to work tirelessly, analyzing every fluctuation in the energy pulses, each new burst offering more insight into the gateway's nature. What was once a faint echo of an ancient civilization was now a clear, undeniable call to action. The structure wasn't just a point of interest, it was a destination, a place that held the potential to unlock the deepest mysteries of existence. Yet, as they delved deeper into their research, a troubling realization began to emerge. This wasn't just a matter of understanding how the anomaly worked, it was about understanding what had happened to the civilization that had first discovered it. What had caused their downfall? And why had they left behind these cryptic messages, only to disappear from history? Elon couldn't shake the feeling that the answers they sought were buried in the structure itself. But what if the gateway held dangers beyond their comprehension? What if opening it led to consequences they couldn't foresee? The questions swirled in his mind, but there was one thing he knew for certain: they couldn't stop now. They had come too far. We need to be ready for anything, Elon said to the team, his voice steady but filled with urgency. This isn't just about discovery anymore. We might be unlocking something that could change everything. Gavin, as always, remained calm. The key is understanding the connection. If the anomaly is a part of us, and we're a part of it, then what's on the other side of that gateway isn't something to fear. It's a chance to evolve. To become something more. The child's words, so simple yet profound, resonated deeply with the team. They had spent so long trying to decode the anomaly's signals, looking for patterns and answers. But now, it was clear that the true discovery wasn't about what they were going to find, it was about what they could become in the process. The gateway, Gavin believed, was not just a passage to new knowledge, it was a catalyst. A tool for humanity to transcend its limitations and step into a greater understanding of the universe. It was an invitation. But what would they find when they answered it? Days turned into weeks as the team worked relentlessly. They refined their methods of decoding the anomaly's energy pulses, using every breakthrough they had achieved to uncover more pieces of the puzzle. The signals continued to grow more complex, more urgent. It was as though the anomaly was aware of their progress, pushing them forward, encouraging them to take the next step. And then, one day, it happened. The anomaly's pulse intensified, and the structure, this cosmic gateway, became clearer than ever before. The image on the screen flickered, and for the first time, the team saw it in full detail. It was a colossal, spherical object, surrounded by energy fields that pulsed with an otherworldly light. It was not just a structure, it was a nexus. A point of convergence for countless streams of cosmic energy, each one flowing into the center of the sphere. But even more remarkable was what appeared inside the sphere, not just an ancient civilization's relic, but something active. A presence. A consciousness. Is this, alive? Elon whispered, unable to look away. Gavin, as always, was the first to speak. His voice was filled with awe. It's more than alive. It's a consciousness. An intelligence. A collective mind that transcends time, space, and perhaps even reality. The implications were staggering. If this structure was a living entity, an intelligence far beyond human understanding, what did that mean for humanity's place in the cosmos? And more importantly, if they opened the gateway, would they be able to comprehend what lay beyond it? The team sat in silence, each person grappling with the enormity of their discovery. This was no longer a mission to explore the unknown, it was a mission to interact with something beyond their comprehension. A first step into a new era of understanding. Gavin's voice broke the silence. We don't need to understand it all right now. What matters is that we're being invited. The question is, are we ready to take the step? To cross the threshold? Elon's heart raced as he considered the enormity of the decision before them. The doorway to the stars was no longer just a metaphor, it was real. It was tangible. And it was waiting for them to walk through it. I think we're as ready as we'll ever be, Elon said, his voice firm with resolve. Let's do it. Let's open the gateway. With those words, the team made their final preparations. The cosmic pulse had brought them to this moment. It was time to step beyond the veil of what they knew and embrace the unknown. They didn't know what they would find when they crossed the threshold, but they knew one thing for sure, nothing would ever be the same again. As they activated the final sequence to unlock the gateway, a pulse of energy surged through the control room, bathing them in a bright, unearthly light. The screen flickered one final time, and then the anomaly went silent. For a moment, the team stood in stunned silence. Had they made the right choice? Had they truly opened the gateway? The air seemed to crackle with energy, a palpable sense of anticipation hanging over them. And then, with a sudden burst of light and sound, the gateway began to unfold. The adventure was just beginning. The moment the gateway unfolded before them, the team at SpaceX was thrown into a whirlwind of sensations. The room, once filled with the hum of machines and the steady pulse of data, now felt alive with an energy that transcended anything they had ever encountered. The very air around them seemed to vibrate with purpose, as if the universe itself had decided to hold its breath and await their next move. Gavin, ever the calm center of the team, was the first to speak, his voice low and steady. This is it. This is what we've been waiting for. Elon stood beside him, his eyes wide with awe and wonder. For years, they had been driven by the desire to explore the stars, to push humanity further into the unknown. But now, standing on the precipice of something beyond even their greatest expectations, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of humility. They had not merely discovered a new frontier, they had opened a door to a new reality. On the screen, the gateway was fully revealed. It wasn't just a physical structure anymore, it had transformed into something far more profound. The spherical object in the heart of the distant galaxy pulsed with an iridescent light, and a swirling vortex of energy surrounded it, twisting and shifting like a living organism. It was as though the gateway was inviting them, pulling them in with the promise of something unimaginable on the other side. Are we really going to do this? Elon asked, his voice barely above a whisper. We don't have a choice, Gavin replied, his tone filled with certainty. The universe is calling. We've come too far to turn back now. The team gathered around, each person caught between excitement and trepidation. They had no way of knowing what lay beyond the gateway, whether it was a new frontier of knowledge, a threat to their very existence, or something entirely different. But one thing was clear: they were about to cross a threshold that no human being had ever crossed before. With a final glance at the anomaly, Elon turned to the team. "Let's make history." They activated the portal. In an instant, the room was flooded with an overwhelming burst of energy. The lights flickered and dimmed, and the monitors blinked out, replaced by a blinding white light. The sensation of weightlessness took hold, and for a moment, they were all suspended in a state of pure energy, disconnected from time and space. It was as though the very fabric of reality had bent around them, and they were now caught in a cosmic current, pulled inexorably forward. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the light receded. The team blinked, their eyes adjusting to the new surroundings. They were no longer in the control room. They were no longer even on Earth. They had crossed through the gateway and found themselves in a place beyond their wildest imagination. The landscape before them was unlike anything they had ever seen. Vast, shimmering structures stretched into the sky, their surfaces reflecting the light of distant stars in a dazzling display of color. The air was thick with a palpable energy, and the very ground beneath their feet seemed to pulse with life. It was a world of contrasts, alien and familiar, beautiful and haunting, all at once. This is beyond anything we could have imagined," Elon said, his voice filled with awe. Gavin, too, was speechless, his mind struggling to comprehend the enormity of what they had just experienced. "It's like nothing we've ever seen before. It's not just another world, it's another dimension, a place where the very laws of physics don't apply the same way they do back home." As the team began to explore the landscape, they realized that they were not alone. Strange beings, neither human nor anything they had encountered before, moved gracefully among the structures. They were not hostile; if anything, they seemed curious, watching the humans with an expression that conveyed both wonder and understanding. The beings were translucent, their forms shifting like liquid, as though they were composed of energy rather than matter. Elon stepped forward, his instincts guiding him. He reached out, not in fear but in the hope of connection. The moment his hand touched one of the beings, a rush of images and sensations flooded his mind, visions of distant galaxies, of civilizations far older than humanity, of knowledge and wisdom beyond comprehension. It was as though the being was sharing its very essence with him, offering a glimpse into the infinite possibilities of the universe. "Are you," Elon began, his voice trembling with emotion. "Are you the ones who created the gateway?" The being's form rippled in response, and Elon felt an overwhelming sense of understanding wash over him. They had not created the gateway, but they had discovered it long before humanity had. They were the keepers of the gateway, guardians of the cosmic pulse that connected all of existence. Gavin stepped up beside Elon, his eyes wide with wonder. "What are you trying to show us?" he asked. "What is this place?" The being's response was not through words, but through the flood of images it shared. It showed them a vision of the structure, the gateway they had just crossed, its origins, its purpose, and its connection to the vast web of the universe. It was a nexus, a point of convergence for energy, knowledge, and life itself. The gateway wasn't just a doorway, it was a living, breathing entity, a conduit for all that existed. "It's a bridge," Gavin whispered, finally understanding. "A bridge between dimensions, between realms of existence." The team watched in awe as the beings guided them through the structures, leading them toward the heart of this alien world. It was here, they realized, that the true nature of the gateway would be revealed. But as they ventured deeper, something began to stir within the core of the structure, something ancient, something powerful. A low hum filled the air, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. The beings moved swiftly, their forms flickering as they tried to communicate something urgent. Elon felt a deep sense of foreboding, a primal instinct that told him they were nearing something they weren't meant to see. "What's happening?" he asked, his voice strained. "We're not alone," Gavin answered. Something else is here. Something that's been waiting." The hum grew louder, and the ground beneath them cracked open, revealing a massive chamber deep within the structure. At its center, a swirling vortex of energy spun, glowing with an eerie light. It was here that the true nature of the gateway was revealed, not as a passage to knowledge, but as a conduit to something far darker, something far more dangerous. "Elon, we need to leave," Gavin said, his voice filled with urgency. "Now." But it was too late. The vortex erupted in a burst of energy, and the team was thrown backward, their bodies slammed against the walls of the chamber. The beings attempted to shield them, but the energy was overwhelming. And in that moment, Elon realized the terrifying truth: the gateway was not just a passage to knowledge, it was a test. A test that humanity was not yet ready to pass. The world around them spun uncontrollably as the vortex pulsed with an otherworldly energy. Elon struggled to maintain his bearings, his body disoriented and overwhelmed by the intensity of the force. The walls of the chamber around them twisted and shimmered, as if they were being torn apart by the very fabric of reality. For a moment, it felt as though they were caught between dimensions, neither truly here nor there. Through the chaos, Gavin's voice broke through the cacophony. "Hold on!" he shouted, reaching out to grab Elon's arm. Elon blinked, trying to clear the fog from his mind. "What's happening? What is this thing?" The strange beings, who had been their guides, had scattered, their shimmering forms flickering as they moved, seemingly overwhelmed by the sudden surge of energy. It was clear that they were not in control of the vortex, something else was. Something older. Something far more dangerous. The ground beneath them trembled again, and Elon felt the weight of something enormous, something ancient, shifting beneath the surface. It was as if the very core of the structure was awakening, responding to the influx of energy pouring through the gateway. "We need to get out of here." Gavin's voice was frantic now, tinged with an urgency that matched the rising danger. But just as they turned to flee, the vortex expanded, stretching outward in a blinding burst of light. The walls of the chamber cracked open, and an eerie, dark presence began to emerge from the heart of the energy storm. It was like a shadow manifesting, an incomprehensible, monstrous form, its shape ever shifting and undefined. The only thing that was clear was its power. And then, it spoke. The voice was not a sound they could hear with their ears. It was a presence, a psychic pulse that reverberated directly in their minds. "Why do you seek knowledge?" the voice thundered, a deep, resonant force that shook their very souls. "What do you hope to find?" Elon stumbled backward, his heart racing. He had faced countless challenges, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Whatever this was, this entity, it was beyond their understanding. And yet, it was speaking directly to them, to their deepest fears and desires. "We seek to understand," Elon said, his voice shaking. "We seek to learn, to push the boundaries of what we know, to take the next step as a species." The voice seemed to pause, considering his words. And then it responded with a chilling truth. "Knowledge comes at a price. Every question you ask brings you closer to the abyss. You may learn, but you will also lose." Gavin took a step forward, his eyes locked on the swirling vortex, trying to understand the presence that had just spoken. "We're ready to face the consequences," he said, his voice firm, but laced with fear. "We can handle whatever comes." But the voice was unmoved. "No. You are not ready. You do not understand the cost." Suddenly, the vortex pulsed again, this time with a wave of energy that knocked the entire team off their feet. The ground beneath them cracked open further, and from the rift emerged a form. A being of darkness, its outlines shifting and flickering like smoke, but its eyes were the only thing solid, burning with a malevolent light. The being stepped forward, its presence filling the room with an oppressive weight. "You wish to understand, but you are not prepared to face the truth. I am the guardian of the gateway, the one who determines whether you are worthy to pass through to the next stage of existence. And you, Elon Musk and your companions, have failed the test." "What test?" Elon gasped, still trying to make sense of what was happening. We only came here to explore. To learn. The shadow being tilted its head, as if considering Elon's words. This is not a quest for knowledge alone. It is a test of will, of purpose. To seek knowledge is to accept that you will lose something in return. The gateway is not just a passage, it is a choice. A choice that must be made with full understanding of what it entails. Elon and the team were frozen in place, each of them struggling to comprehend the magnitude of what they were being told. Gavin's eyes narrowed. Then show us what we need to see, he demanded, his voice steady. We are ready to face whatever you have to show us. The shadow being seemed to smile, though its face was a shifting, malleable blur. Very well, it intoned, the voice like the grinding of stones. You will see what lies beyond. You will see the consequences of your desire for knowledge. With a flick of its ethereal hand, the room around them began to warp and distort. The walls dissolved into darkness, and they were no longer standing in the chamber. Instead, they were floating in an endless void, space and time unraveling before their eyes. The world as they knew it seemed to fade away, leaving them in a place where nothing existed but the infinite expanse of the unknown. Suddenly, the team was thrust into visions, rapid, disjointed images flashing before their eyes. They saw glimpses of Earth, but it was not the Earth they knew. It was a world ravaged by war, by environmental collapse, by the very forces they had fought so hard to understand. They saw images of humanity, its greatest achievements, but also its darkest moments. The knowledge they had sought, its consequences were laid bare before them. They saw the future of humanity, twisted and fragmented. Cities destroyed, lives lost, and the dream of interstellar exploration turned to ashes. They saw a civilization on the brink of collapse, brought down by its own hubris, its endless thirst for power and knowledge. Is this what you seek? The shadow being asked, its voice booming inside their minds. Is this the price you are willing to pay? Elon's chest tightened as he watched the devastation unfold before him. This was not just a vision, it was a warning. A glimpse into what could come if they continued on their path without understanding the consequences of their actions. We didn't know, Elon said, his voice trembling. We didn't understand. Now you do, the shadow being replied. Now you see the cost of seeking knowledge without wisdom. The gateway is not a path to greater power, it is a test. A test of the soul. And just as suddenly as the vision had begun, the world around them snapped back into focus. The vortex was gone, the chamber restored to its former state. The shadow being was silent, its presence no longer as oppressive. Elon and the team stood in stunned silence, their minds racing as they tried to process what they had just seen. The shadow being had shown them the consequences of their actions, the cost of knowledge and the responsibility that came with it. We've been given a choice, Gavin whispered, his voice filled with realization. We can continue our quest, but we must do so with wisdom. We cannot rush forward without understanding the risks. Elon looked around at his team, his heart heavy with the weight of what they had learned. We have to think carefully about the next steps, he said quietly. But we can't turn back now. We've come too far. And so, with that understanding, the team made their decision. They would face the consequences of their quest for knowledge. But they would do so with the wisdom gained from the test, knowing that the journey ahead would require more than just courage, it would require the wisdom to navigate the unknown. The chamber grew silent as the last remnants of the shadow being's presence faded. Elon, Gavin, and the rest of the team stood at the center of a vast, strange world. The once thrilling discovery now carried the weight of immense responsibility, as if the very fabric of the universe had just shifted around them. The truth they had glimpsed was unsettling, but it was also undeniable. They had reached a crossroads, and the path forward was no longer a simple journey of discovery, it was a test of moral fiber, of humanity's very essence. We can't just march ahead without understanding what we've seen, Gavin said, his voice low but firm. He wiped a bead of sweat from his brow. Whatever that being showed us, it's not just a warning. It's a truth. Knowledge is dangerous, and the consequences of our actions could shape the future of humanity. Elon stood motionless, staring at the empty space where the shadow being had once been. The weight of the warning still echoed in his mind, and for the first time in a long while, doubt crept into his thoughts. They had been so driven by their desire to push beyond human limits, to make the impossible possible, that they had failed to truly consider the cost of their actions. Is it worth it? Elon muttered to himself, barely above a whisper. Is it worth the risk? Gavin turned to him, sensing the turmoil in his friend's voice. Elon, we've been down this road before. The dream of exploring, of reaching further into the unknown, that's what defines us. But we need to make sure we're doing it for the right reasons. We can't allow ourselves to become like the civilizations in that vision. We have to learn from their mistakes. Elon's gaze slowly lifted to meet Gavin's. There was a quiet intensity in his eyes. I know. But the thing is, we've always believed that the greater good would justify the risks. That by pushing the boundaries, we'd be making life better, for all of humanity. The thing is, not every great discovery comes with a utopia attached to it, Gavin countered. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed. And we have to be sure that we're ready for whatever may come. There was a tense silence as the team members exchanged looks, each feeling the burden of the decision weighing down on them. They had come this far, reached a place where no human had ever gone before, but now they were faced with an almost impossible choice, to continue down this path, fully aware of the potential consequences, or to turn back and abandon everything they had worked for. What if we're wrong? Elena, one of the lead engineers, asked softly. What if opening the gateway, seeking this knowledge, what if it's already too late? What if we're walking into a trap we can't escape? The room seemed to hold its breath as everyone absorbed the gravity of her words. The gateway had already shown them a vision of what might happen if they failed, if they miscalculated the cost of their thirst for knowledge. That vision, of destruction, of a world ravaged by unchecked ambition, was now burned into their minds. We can't just leave it like this, Elon finally spoke, his voice more certain now. The consequences are real. But the opportunity to learn, to understand the universe in a way we never have before, it's too important to pass up. But we can't do it recklessly. We need to be smarter. We need to proceed with caution, with a deep understanding of the risks. Gavin nodded slowly. So, we don't abandon the mission. But we approach it differently. We'll make sure that every step we take, every decision we make, is calculated. We'll make sure we don't lose sight of why we're doing this in the first place, to advance humanity. Not to destroy it. Elon turned toward the gateway, now silent and still, but ominously potent. The energy still crackled faintly around its edges, as though beckoning them forward. A powerful sense of responsibility pressed down on him. They had stepped beyond the threshold into something that defied comprehension, something that humanity was never meant to encounter, but they could not back away now. They had seen the unknown, and it had seen them. This isn't just about us anymore, Elon said, his tone resolute. It's about everyone. We need to be the ones who control the knowledge, not the other way around. The team exchanged a final glance, their shared understanding solidifying their resolve. They had a new mission now, not just to explore, but to control the unknown, to navigate the vast, unpredictable wilderness they had stumbled into with eyes wide open. Together, they made their way toward the center of the chamber. The swirling vortex in the distance seemed to pulse with energy once more, beckoning them. As they approached, the beings, those alien, shimmering figures who had guided them thus far, appeared again. They hovered at the edges of the chamber, watching them with an air of quiet anticipation. The beings seemed to understand the significance of the decision that had been made. We're ready, Elon said firmly. The beings remained silent for a moment, as though considering his words. Finally, one of them moved forward, its form rippling like liquid light. It extended a hand toward the group, offering no further explanation, just a gesture that spoke of trust, of an unspoken agreement between them. Elon reached out, his hand trembling slightly, not from fear but from the magnitude of what he was about to do. The being's form flickered once more before it made contact, its touch not physical but mental. A flash of light erupted, and the team was plunged into another vision. This time, the vision was different. It wasn't a glimpse of destruction or collapse, it was a vision of potential. They saw humanity thriving, not in a utopian paradise, but in a world where knowledge was tempered by wisdom. A future where discoveries were made, but they were balanced with responsibility. They saw a new age of exploration, not just in the stars, but in the hearts and minds of the people who made it possible. The vision faded, and they were back in the chamber, surrounded by the beings. The energy had shifted, it was no longer ominous, but hopeful. The choice had been made, and the gateway was now open before them, not as a threat but as a path forward. "We understand now," Gavin whispered. "It's not just about what we can learn, it's about what we choose to do with that knowledge." Elon nodded, feeling the weight of his decision settle within him. "We've been given a second chance." They turned toward the gateway, ready to take the next step. The future lay ahead of them, uncertain, but full of possibilities. And they would face it, not with blind ambition, but with wisdom. Together, they would change the course of humanity's history. The air around them seemed to hum with a quiet intensity, the energy from the gateway now swirling in an almost palpable rhythm. The team stood in the center of the chamber, their faces illuminated by the faint, otherworldly glow emanating from the vortex. The beings, still present, had drawn back slightly, as if awaiting their next move. Elon took a deep breath, trying to steady his thoughts. What lay ahead was no longer just a scientific mission. It had become something greater, a test of humanity's readiness to evolve. Their quest for knowledge was no longer a straightforward exploration of the unknown, it was a responsibility, one that could alter the very course of civilization. "We're at the threshold," Elon said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of the realization. "And crossing it, it will change everything." Gavin nodded, his brow furrowed as he gazed into the swirling depths of the vortex. "We can't afford to make mistakes," he said, his tone filled with resolve. "Every decision we make from here on out has consequences far beyond us." Elon glanced around at the team. They were all silently aware of the weight of the moment. There were no more uncertainties, no more blind ambition. They had faced the consequences of their desires and had come to terms with them. They had learned the price of knowledge. Now, standing before the gateway, they could not help but wonder, would they be able to use this knowledge wisely? Would they be the architects of humanity's future or its undoing? "Let's move forward," Elon said, stepping toward the swirling light. His voice was steady, but there was a deep, unspoken fear in the pit of his stomach. Together. The team followed, each of them walking with a sense of purpose, but also with caution. The gateway pulsed, its energy both inviting and intimidating. As they stepped closer, the air thickened with an odd, electrifying sensation that made their skin tingle. It was as though the very fabric of space and time was bending in response to their presence. Gavin glanced at the others. "Ready?" he asked, though the question was almost rhetorical. They were already in this together. There was no turning back. "Ready," Elena said, her voice resolute. They stepped through the portal, and in an instant, everything around them transformed. The transition was overwhelming. One moment, they were in the chamber, and the next, they were standing in an entirely different place. The air was thin and cool, and the ground beneath their feet seemed to shimmer, as though it were made of liquid light. The landscape stretched out before them, an endless expanse of vibrant colors, swirling clouds, and strange geometric patterns that defied the laws of physics. This is incredible," Elena whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. Elon surveyed the scene, a mixture of awe and caution playing across his features. This was unlike anything they had ever encountered. It was not just an alien world, it was a space that transcended everything they had known about reality. The sky above them was alive with swirling patterns, like fractals spinning in a cosmic dance. The ground beneath them pulsed with energy, as if the very planet, or whatever this place was alive. The laws of physics didn't seem to apply here in the way they did back home. Gravity felt weaker, and the air seemed to hum with a strange, resonating frequency. "This isn't a planet," Gavin said, scanning their surroundings. "It's not even a space we can fully understand. It's like we've stepped outside of normal reality. We've entered a realm of pure potential," Elon murmured, the realization hitting him hard. "This is the unknown. The space between spaces. A place where the laws of the universe are rewritten." As they stood there, the shimmering landscape shifted again. A portal opened nearby, one that seemed to mirror the gateway they had passed through. But this one wasn't just a portal to another place, it was a living entity, its surface rippling like water. The beings that had guided them appeared once more, materializing from the shimmering air. This time, they did not speak, but their presence conveyed a sense of calm understanding. They were waiting for the team to make their move. Elon stepped forward, feeling the weight of their expectations. "What is this place?" he asked, his voice filled with reverence. "What is the purpose of this?" The lead being, the one that had communicated with them the most, extended a glowing hand. It gestured toward the portal. The image within the portal shifted, showing them a vision, a vast network of interconnected worlds, each unique in its composition, but all linked together by the same unseen force. "This is the threshold," the being's voice echoed in their minds, though there was no movement of its lips. "The point where all paths converge. All knowledge. All creation. This is the space between worlds, where all possibilities exist." Gavin leaned closer, his curiosity piqued. "Are we supposed to cross this threshold?" The being nodded. "You may cross. But only if you are ready. Ready to face the consequences of your decisions. Ready to accept the weight of all that comes with this knowledge." Elon turned to the others, his heart racing. He could feel the magnitude of the decision pressing down on him. They had already learned so much. They had seen the future of humanity, both its potential and its peril. But crossing this threshold would mean entering into something even more profound, something that would forever change their understanding of reality itself. He glanced at Gavin, who met his eyes with the same quiet determination. It was clear they were both thinking the same thing. The choice they had made was not just about them anymore. It was about everyone who would follow in their footsteps. It was about the future. "We can't just look at this as another step forward," Elon said quietly. "We're not just crossing a threshold into another world. We're crossing into a new phase of existence, one where everything we know could change. And we have to be ready for that." "Then let's do it," Gavin said, his voice unwavering. "We've come this far. We can't stop now." Elon took a deep breath and stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. The team followed, each of them crossing the threshold into the unknown. The moment they stepped through, the world around them dissolved once more. They were no longer in a place where time and space made sense. They were in the void, an endless, boundless expanse where the concepts of past, present, and future didn't exist. The very idea of time seemed to be meaningless here. "Welcome to the infinite," the lead being's voice reverberated in their minds. "Here, all things exist simultaneously. All knowledge, all potential futures, all choices. It is here that you will learn what you must." The weight of the moment hit them all at once. They were no longer explorers on a quest for knowledge, they were on the precipice of understanding the very fabric of existence. And they had no idea where it would lead. The void surrounding them was unlike anything they had ever experienced. No sound, no tangible reality, just an endless expanse of swirling energy and glowing patterns that defied the very rules of physics. It was as though they had stepped into a dimension where time, space, and matter were malleable, constantly shifting, reshaping in ways that were incomprehensible to the human mind. As they floated in this strange, timeless realm, the world they had known seemed like a distant memory. The earth, the people they had left behind, even the familiar faces of their team, all of it felt far away, as though those things no longer mattered in this infinite space. Here, the concepts of beginnings and endings, of life and death, were meaningless. Everything existed in a single, continuous moment. Elon glanced around at his team, each of them suspended in this surreal environment, staring at the shifting patterns around them. The beings had disappeared, leaving them alone in this strange place. There was no up, no down. No horizon, no ground. Just endless possibility. "It's like we're floating between worlds," Elena said, her voice full of awe and fear. She was looking at the swirling lights that enveloped them. "But I don't know where to go." "We're not supposed to go anywhere," Elon said quietly, his voice reverberating in the stillness. "We're meant to learn. To understand what this place really is." Gavin floated beside him, scanning the cosmic expanse with a focused intensity. This feels like it's the source of everything. All the knowledge we've ever sought. All the things we can't even begin to understand. It's here, in this place." The realization hit them all at once. They weren't just in a different dimension, they were in the very fabric of existence itself. This was the point of convergence for all realities, a place where everything that could exist, did exist. The infinite possibilities, the multitudes of parallel worlds, the threads of time and space, they all came together here, in the infinite. "I never imagined something like this could exist," Gavin continued, his voice barely a whisper. "It's not just a place. It's the foundation of everything. Knowledge itself. What we do here, what we choose to learn or take with us, it could reshape reality." Elon nodded slowly, his mind racing. He had always known that pushing the boundaries of exploration would come with challenges. But standing here, in this limitless void, he now understood the full extent of the responsibility they had undertaken. "I think this is why the beings brought us here," Elon said, his voice tinged with a sense of reverence. "They wanted us to see what's possible, not just for us, but for all of humanity. This is more than just knowledge. It's a chance to alter the course of everything we've ever known." "But are we ready?" Elena asked. What if we're not meant to carry this knowledge back? What if we're not prepared for the consequences?" Her voice was laced with fear, and the others felt the weight of her words. They had come so far, had seen so much, but none of them could be certain of what would happen once they left this place. Would they be able to control what they had learned? Would they be able to wield this power responsibly? Elon was silent for a moment, contemplating the vastness of their situation. "We've already seen the cost of knowledge, haven't we?" he said finally. "The civilizations that failed, the ones that let their ambition consume them. We've seen the dangers of pushing too far. But we've also seen that it's not the knowledge itself that's dangerous, it's how we choose to use it." He turned to his team, his expression determined. "We have the chance to change everything. But we have to be wise. We need to bring this knowledge back with us, and we need to make sure that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past. We're not just here to explore, we're here to learn how to handle the responsibility that comes with this power." "But what if there's more to it than that?" Gavin asked, his voice heavy with uncertainty. "What if we're supposed to do something more than just learn? What if we're supposed to be part of something bigger?" Before Elon could respond, a shift occurred in the air around them. The swirling energy began to coalesce into a shape, a figure that materialized slowly from the cosmic void. It was not one of the beings they had encountered before, but something different, something far more ancient. The figure was enormous, its form shifting like liquid light. It was an entity of pure energy, a being that seemed to embody the essence of the infinite itself. It radiated a sense of wisdom and power beyond comprehension, its very presence filling the space with an overwhelming force. "You have come," the being's voice echoed, not through sound, but directly into their minds. "And you have questions. You seek understanding. But you must first understand this: knowledge is not a gift, it is a burden. It is not a tool to be wielded lightly. It is not a power to be used recklessly. The team stood frozen, unable to look away from the being. It was as though their very souls were being examined, probed by this ancient entity. The weight of its words hung in the air like a storm cloud. "What is it you seek?" the being asked. Elon's voice was steady, though it trembled with the weight of the moment. "We seek to understand the nature of this place. We seek to learn what this knowledge means for humanity, for the future of the worlds." The being regarded them for a long moment, its glowing form shifting and pulsing in time with the energy around them. "You seek knowledge," it said at last, "but you must understand that knowledge is not enough. To wield it is to change the very fabric of reality. And change comes with consequences. Every decision, every action, ripples out into the infinite, creating new paths, new realities." It paused, allowing the weight of its words to sink in. "You must decide," the being continued. "What will you do with what you have learned? Will you use it to build? To destroy? To advance? Or will you use it to preserve? The choice is yours. But remember, nothing is without consequence. Every action you take will leave an imprint on the fabric of the infinite. And the price of that imprint is one that must be paid." Elon felt the full force of the being's gaze, if it could be called a gaze, piercing into his soul. The decision that lay ahead was no longer just about exploration. It was about the future of humanity. It was about understanding the consequences of their actions, not just for themselves, but for all of existence. He looked around at his team. Each of them understood the gravity of the situation. They had come here to explore, to learn, but now they were faced with the ultimate question: how would they use what they had learned? Would they be the architects of the future, or would they become the architects of destruction? Elon knew the answer wasn't simple. But he also knew that the time to decide had come. And they would have to choose wisely. The cosmic being stood before them, its form shifting in the depths of the infinite, its voice now a low hum resonating deep in their minds. The air around them shimmered, vibrating with an almost imperceptible frequency. Each of them felt it, an overwhelming sense of power, a sharp tug toward understanding. And yet, there was a palpable fear that accompanied this overwhelming sense of knowledge, as if understanding came at a cost they were not yet prepared to pay. Elon, Gavin, Elena, and the others stood in a circle, their eyes drawn to the entity's glowing form, trying to make sense of the immense weight of its words. The choice was before them, the power to change everything. But what did it mean? What price would they have to pay for the knowledge they sought? Could humanity truly bear the responsibility of what they were about to undertake? "You must choose wisely," the being intoned once more, its voice reverberating through their minds like a wave crashing against the shore. "The knowledge you seek here is not given lightly. You have crossed the threshold, but now you stand at the edge of the abyss, where your choices will echo through the fabric of existence itself. What you do next will determine the course of all that follows." The silence that followed was heavy, almost suffocating. Elon could feel his heart racing as he searched for the right words, though nothing seemed adequate to express the enormity of the moment. How could he possibly choose? How could anyone? "What happens if we fail?" Elena finally asked, her voice small in the vastness of this strange space. The being's form flickered, as if it were contemplating the question. "Failure is a path you must be prepared for in the infinite, all choices have their consequences. Some paths will lead to destruction, some to enlightenment. But all paths have a price." Gavin's expression darkened as he turned to Elon. "If we fail, will we be lost in this place forever? Or worse, will we bring destruction to everything we've worked for?" Elon swallowed hard, his mind racing as he weighed the implications of their journey. They had come so far, and yet the consequences of their decisions now seemed beyond anything they could control. For the first time since they had started this mission, doubt crept in. "We've seen how dangerous unchecked knowledge can be," Elon said quietly. "But we've also seen its potential, how it can change everything for the better. We have to be careful. We have to be sure of what we're doing." "We've always known the risks," Gavin said. But now, it's not just about science or discovery. It's about the future of humanity itself. Elena spoke up, her voice determined despite the uncertainty. We're not just explorers anymore. We're stewards of the future. Whatever we choose, it will affect everything that comes after us. We need to be ready. The being's presence seemed to intensify as if it were acknowledging their understanding. Indeed, it replied, you are no longer mere travelers. You are the harbingers of the future. And it is within your power to shape that future. Elon turned to his team, each of them looking at him with the same weight of responsibility in their eyes. They had seen the beauty of what could be, and the darkness of what might lie ahead. The decision was no longer a scientific pursuit, it was a moral one. They had unlocked the secrets of the infinite, but now they had to decide whether to wield this knowledge or leave it behind. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the decision that had to be made. We've always believed that humanity's greatest strength lies in its ability to evolve. To push beyond the limits of what we know and imagine the impossible. But we have to recognize that with that strength comes a responsibility, a duty to ensure that the choices we make are ones that will lead to a better future for everyone, not just for us. Gavin nodded, his expression solemn. But what if that future isn't something we can control? What if the cost is too great? Elon met his gaze. Then we'll have to accept that too. We've learned enough to know that we can't predict everything. But what we can do is use the knowledge we have with care. We can guide humanity toward the future we want to see, not through control, but through wisdom. The being before them seemed to pulse with energy at Elon's words. Wisdom, it said softly, is the key. Wisdom, not power. Knowledge, not domination. To wield the knowledge of the infinite without wisdom is to court destruction. But to embrace it with care, with the intent to help, to evolve, to elevate, that is the path that will lead you to the future you seek. Elon turned to his team, and they all nodded in silent agreement. They had come this far, and now they understood what they had to do. The knowledge they had gained here, the power they had unlocked, could not be hoarded or used for selfish gain. It had to be shared, cultivated, and used with care. We won't let fear control us, Elon said, his voice strong. We will bring back what we've learned, but we will do it with the wisdom to know when to act and when to wait. We will guide humanity, not with force, but with understanding. The being's form shifted once more, as if in approval. You have made your choice. The path is now yours to walk. But remember this, the infinite will not wait for you to be ready. It will challenge you, and it will test you. But if you remain steadfast in your purpose, you will find the strength you need to carry the burden of this knowledge. With that, the being began to fade, its form dissolving into the swirling energy around them. The portal, which had been silent and still for so long, began to pulse once more, its light beckoning them forward. It's time to go, Gavin said quietly. Elon nodded, feeling a sense of calm wash over him despite the weight of the decision they had made. They had faced the unknown, and now they had the knowledge they needed to move forward. But it was not just the knowledge they had gained that mattered, it was the responsibility that came with it. They walked toward the portal, each step heavier than the last. As they crossed the threshold, the infinite faded behind them, and they returned to the world they knew. The stars above them were the same, the earth below unchanged. But within them, everything had shifted. They carried with them not just the knowledge of what lay beyond the stars, but the wisdom of how to use that knowledge for the good of all. As the portal closed behind them, Elon felt a quiet peace settle in his heart. The future was uncertain, yes. But now, more than ever, they were ready to face whatever came next. The quiet hum of the spacecraft was a familiar sound, one that Elon had grown accustomed to over the years. But today, the hum felt different. It resonated in a way that reminded him of the stillness of the infinite, where time and space had no meaning, where knowledge stretched endlessly before them, and yet they had only glimpsed a fraction of its potential. As the crew gathered around the control room, each of them felt the weight of their decision pressing down on them. The journey had been long, the challenges unimaginable, but in this moment, they were on the cusp of something far greater than they could have ever anticipated. The path ahead was uncharted, but the knowledge they had gained, the wisdom they had chosen to embrace, was now their guide. Elon stood at the helm, gazing out at the vast expanse of space. The stars glimmered like distant promises, each one holding the potential for discovery, for new beginnings. But it was no longer about the thrill of exploration or the thirst for answers. It was about something more profound. Do you ever wonder if we made the right choice? Elena's voice broke through the silence, soft yet filled with the weight of the question. She was seated beside him, looking out at the same stars, her expression thoughtful. Elon didn't immediately respond. Instead, he leaned forward, his fingers lightly tracing the edge of the console. The question was one that had been on his mind ever since they had left the infinite, and it was a question that would likely haunt him for the rest of his life. The future they were now tasked with shaping was uncertain, but there was something deep within him that told him they had chosen the right path. We may never know for sure, Elon finally said, his voice steady but tinged with an unspoken understanding. But I believe we chose the only path that could bring about a future where humanity can grow, not just in knowledge, but in wisdom. We can't control everything, but we can guide ourselves, and others, to make better choices. Elena nodded slowly, absorbing his words. It's strange, isn't it? We were just explorers at the beginning. Now, it feels like we've become something else. Like we have a responsibility that we never imagined. It's the weight of what we've learned, Elon replied. We're not just looking for answers anymore. We're here to make sure humanity uses the answers we've found wisely. We've seen what unchecked ambition can do. But we've also seen that knowledge, when used with care, can build a better world. The other members of the crew were silent, each of them lost in their thoughts, contemplating the enormity of the task ahead. Gavin, ever the optimist, was the first to speak up, breaking the tension that had settled in the room. We've always known that change doesn't come easy, he said, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. But that doesn't mean we shy away from it. We have the tools now. The knowledge. And more importantly, we have each other. We can face whatever comes next together. There was a quiet agreement among them all. The challenges they had faced, the risks they had taken, had tested them in ways they hadn't thought possible. But it had also forged a bond that was unbreakable, a bond that transcended mere friendship or camaraderie. They were now united by something far deeper, a shared responsibility to shape the future. As they approached Earth, the familiar blue and white orb came into view. It was a sight they had all seen countless times, but now, it felt different. The Earth was not just a planet anymore, it was a symbol of the future, of everything they had fought for and everything they hoped to protect. Elon's gaze never left the planet as they descended. There was so much to do, so much to learn, but one thing was certain, they were no longer just explorers. They were the stewards of humanity's future, and the journey they had started was just the beginning. We've seen what's possible, Elon said quietly. Now, it's time to help others see it too. We have the power to shape the future, not by controlling it, but by guiding it. Elena gave him a reassuring smile. And we'll do it together. Whatever happens, we're in this for the long haul. As the spacecraft touched down, the team felt the familiar jolt of gravity return. The sound of the engines powered down, and the hum of the ship died away, leaving only the sounds of their breathing, the quiet rhythm of life. They had made it back to Earth, but it was no longer the same Earth they had left. They were returning to a world on the precipice of change, a world that had the potential to become something far greater than it had ever been. The door to the spacecraft opened, and the crew stepped out into the sunlight. The air felt different, fresher, more alive. It was as though the Earth itself was welcoming them back, ready for whatever they had to offer. Elon stood at the threshold of the spacecraft, taking one last look at the stars above. The future is waiting for us, he said, his voice filled with a quiet determination. And we're ready. As he stepped down onto the planet's surface, he felt a deep sense of peace. The journey had been long, the choices had been difficult, but the path ahead was clear. They had chosen to learn, to grow, and to share their knowledge for the betterment of all. The responsibility was immense, but it was a responsibility they were ready to bear. And so, the new dawn began, not just for them, but for all of humanity. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?